And I did the.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'll call the meeting to order. Meeting of the Carver Select Board for Thursday, May 19th, 2022. This meeting is being cablecast by Area 58 Community Access Media, Channel 15, and will be posted by Area 58 on YouTube as soon as possible. There are openings on several committees. Please refer to the Select Board page on our website for a listing and application. If we could all stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Carter, would you like to read our community prayer?
Sure. Almighty God, humbly we pray your blessing as we concern our life with the opportunity to serve our community. Enhance us with your spirit and dignity and selflessness. May we become instruments of support and understanding as we seek to bring an environment of trust and purpose among all who provide the many services that make us all that we can become. Help us achieve the goals of our commitment in this office that is now our responsibility. And especially we lift our prayers for all the citizens of our community that we have been allowed to serve, that they may discover the fullness and joy of life that we all seek. And keep those serving in our armed forces and our first responders in our hearts and thoughts. Amen.
Amen. And thank you, Mr. Carter. All right, just a couple of quick notes before we begin our interviews today. So, as I think you all know, we're here today to interview candidates for the position of town administrator. These have all been screened previously by the consultant we hired, MRI. We have Mr. Bob, I'm sorry, I don't remember your last name.
Mercier.
Bob Mercier here from MRI. They were also talked to, screened by the screening committee. They've come on down to three applicants, three finalists, David Marciello, Robert Fennessy, our current interim town administrator, and Michael Mcgovern, and we'll be interviewing all three candidates today. All the select board members have submitted questions, and they've been all grouped together in a list. What we'll do today is we'll go around the questions have all been ordered. Here in your sheets, we'll go around the room and we'll ask our questions. Obviously, if you have follow-up questions or need a little more detail, feel free to ask. I would just ask the members to keep in mind that we're on a pretty tight schedule here, so we have to move along as best we can. But obviously, we need to get whatever information we feel we need from the applicants. So if you need a follow-up, please go ahead and ask a follow-up. I think all of us, the four of us, except for Mr. Carter, have been through this a couple of times already. So, John, do you have any questions before we start?
Nope.
All right.
All set.
All right. Anyone else? Any questions?
Well,
Mr. Hoffman, did you have?
I'm sorry, I guess I do have a question.
Mr. Carter, thank you.
I just wanted to say this before all the interviews happen, and it's not a reflection of any candidate. And I see on the agenda that there's a possible vote, maybe after this is done. I just think for myself, I would need like time to absorb all the answers to all the questions for the three candidates. So I'm probably an open mind, but I don't know if I'd be ready to make a decision today.
Well, and again, the agenda item is a discussion and possible vote. So after we complete all our interview questions and talk to the applicants,
That's fine.
then we'll discuss it. We'll talk about it and see where we are when we get there. So if we feel like we're ready to go forward, then we'll go forward. If not, we have a meeting on the 24th, and we'll have that as an agenda item on our meeting on the 24th. So, all right, Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I just wanted to let the board and the public know that my mom had a little accident last night, so I'm just waiting for some updates. So if I'm looking at my phone, I'm not being rude or disrespectful to anybody. I'm just waiting for an update from the hospisptal. So I just want to let everybody know.
That's fine. Thank you for letting us know. And if you need a quick recess, please let us know, and we'll call it
Thank you.
recess. Okay.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, I have a similar situation with my husband, so if I get a call and have to run out, that's what that's about.
That's fine. Again, if you need a recess for some reason, just let us know. We'll call it quick recess. Okay. All right. Shelby, could you ask Mr. Marciello to step in and join us?
I'll bring him in, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
Good morning. How are you doing? All right. Say it.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, this is Mr. Marciello. You have all of his information. He has an MPA, he has a BA, MPA, and he's an attorney. He was in Rehoboth for about 10 years. He was in Millbury, he was a town manager there for 3 years. And he's actively in the process of getting back engaged in local government. So Dave Marciello.
Mr. Chairman, may I approach?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Dave. Thank you. Hello, Dave.
Welcome, thank you.
Thank you.
John Carver.
Thank you. Let's go.
Hi.
Nice. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Marciello, just quickly, what we're going to do this morning is the members of the select board have submitted a number of questions that they have for town administrator candidates. What we're going to do is go around the room and ask the questions and any follow-ups that may come up. And then when we finish, we'll have an opportunity for you to tell us anything you may want to let us know that we may have missed or you think it might be important to our decision. All right? Do you have any questions before we start?
I do not have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
I know you have a busy schedule, so I'm ready when you folks are.
We have a busy schedule, but we want to get any information we may need. So if there's something you think we need to know, please make sure you enlighten us, all right? All right. I think as busy as the schedule may be, it's important to get this right for the town. So, all right, I guess I'll start. If you could you just please share with us what you know about our community and from your perspective, what are its strengths, its weaknesses, and its unique characteristics?
As you have seen in my submissions, I lived in Rehoboth since 1998. I worked in Rehoboth for 10 years, and I was a finalist, I believe, or maybe a semifinalist here in Carver in 2013. I've had Carver on my radar since way back when, because Carver and Rehoboth, in my estimation and what I've submitted to you, they're sister cities in almost all respects. 45 miles outside of Boston, agricultural roots, volunteer boards, committees, EMS. The way that the governmental structure is set up, it's where I thrive, it's where I choose to live, it's where I feel the most comfortable. And I know Carver because I live Carver. Rehoboth and Carver are sisters. And that's why I've chosen Carver as the MRI can attest. I'm very, very particular in where I apply. I'm fortunate in my situation that I have enough of economic stability that I don't have to have a job right away in any particular time or place. So I choose very particularly where I apply, and that's why Carver has been on my radar twice. What do I know about Carver? I know your agricultural roots. I know your, I've read everything you've had. I've read your minutes of your town meeting. I've read your capital budget. I've read all of your newspaper clippings. I know the projects that are coming in the north and the solar. I've lived it. I've seen it. I've done it. And I think that it's a perfect match for what I've done in my past and what I want to do going forward.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens?
So this may seem redundant, but why do you want to come to Carver in particular?
Carver in particular because it's where I'm most happy. I have been a strong town manager in two places, as an interim in Lunenburg and as the actual in Millbury. And in Millbury, and I've also been an administrator in Rehoboth for 10 years, and I was a graduate assistant as well. In Millbury, the charter was incredibly strong toward the management. The Board of Selectmen had very little authority. Almost everything was plenary through the manager. It was too much. It was just too much. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't fun, and it's not what I want to do. I'm much more focused in in tune with a collaborative type approach and being one of the pieces of the puzzle, an important piece, you know, one cog in the machine, an important cog, but not basically 90% of the policies and all of the implementation and all of the budget is on your plate, which is not fun. And that's why Carver is the type of community that I live in. It's the type of community I worked in for 10 years and where I want to finish my career because it's where I'm most happy.
Thank you. If I could just quickly add before we continue, I probably should have said this at the beginning. A lot of the questions that the board submitted were similar, not the same, but similar. So when grouping the questions, we tried our best to group those together. So one would sort of lead into another. So just so everyone is aware of that. Mr. Hoffman.
What are the two most important features you feel a town administrator needs to have to be successful?
In defining features, are you meaning characteristics or are you meaning education quality traits? Define what you mean more.
Characteristics.
Characteristics. Leadership, empathy, I think they go hand in hand. Leadership kind of breaks down into understanding how to corroborate, understanding when the buck has to stop with you, understanding where to step away and let others take the lead. I think that's very important, especially in a community such as this. And remaining human, being empathetic, because we're human. This is a job, but it's a service above all. So you have to understand you're dealing with people, you're dealing with people's issues, you're dealing with people's problems, you're dealing with often emotions. So you have to understand that comes with the territory. And everything else is what, you know, all my career and my education and my training is prepared me for, you know, the budgets and, you know, the HR and being an attorney and having an MBA. That's all prepared me for those characteristics that you say are need to be implemented.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cotter.
Sure. One second. Can you provide, I know looking at your resume, it looks like you left Millbury at January of 2020. So can you provide a brief summary of why you left your current position? And the second part of the question, if somebody answered what attracted you to the current town administrative position for the town of Carver. If you've got something else to add, that's fine.
Why I left Millbury? It wasn't a good fit, and it wasn't a good fit on both sides. I was hired by the initial board of selectmen as a change agent. They wanted me to come in and change things. There were many things that were wrong. There were 20 years, no exaggeration, 20 years of no infrastructure. They had roads that, no exaggeration, were literally rubble. There wasn't a piece of asphalt on them, they were rubble. They had a bridge that was closed off of Main Street for years, and then they would complain that they had no economic development. The bridge is closed off of Main Street. I mean, that kind of, you don't need a rocket scientist degree to figure that one out. So they hired me to come in and overturn the apple cart. That's why I was hired. And as soon as they hired me, 3 of the members of the board got off the board. And what do you think happened? 3 new members came on that wanted the old way back. So I hired every single department head that you can imagine other than the police chief. And after I left, they had replaced every single one of my hires with people from in town. So they wanted to go back to the old way, and the change agent was no longer what they wanted. But that being said, I left them in a fantastic economic and infrastructure position. When I left them, they had never put 1 penny into OPEB. I had put 800,000 into OPEB. When I left them, when I started, they had $200,000 worth of free cash. When I left, it was, I think, 1.4 million or 1.8 million. I had brought their reserves from 2% up to 10% in 3 years. I had done $15 million worth of infrastructure and did not have an override or debt exclusion. I did it all within the budget and mainly from funds that were from outside the budget. I had special legislation passed that applied to Rehoboth that has since been codified by the state that applies to everyone. It's Mass General Law, excuse me, I said Rehoboth, I meant Millbury. It's Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 5, Paragraph 4. I stood before the Senate Committee and the House, Joint Senate House Committee on marijuana legislation, and I convinced them that we should take the marijuana money and allow under a local vote to have that money 100% earmarked. It does not go into the general fund. And I had Millbury's earmarked into 5 major lost boxes, if you will. Payment of bans and bonds for infrastructure, stormwater liability, they had a $4 million stormwater liability, OPEB, which had $0 when I started, unfunded liability payments like comp time, sick time, vacation time, payback, and capital improvements. So I took I renegotiated the marijuana licenses, and I took all of that money, I put it into these funds. So all of their capital improvements are being funded by it. They're not raising money. All of the $15 million worth of infrastructure being funded by this. They're building a school being funded, not totally by this, but it's paying the bands as they're going along. So that being said, I look at it as how can we take what is before us and make the most out of it to benefit the town. And that's what I did. I was hired as a change agent. I went in there and made change. I set them up, brought their bond rating through the roof, got their stabilization funds to 10%, and then they had decided that, they wanted to go back to the old way of doing things, and I was in their way. They hired all their old friends, and everyone that I hired was let go. So that's why I left, and to be honest, that's why they let me go. They paid me, I actually left in August, and they paid me through January, because it behooved them to start with the budget cycle at, September, October time. So they wanted to get their way of doing things in order and throw my way of doing things out. So it behooved them to get me out of there before the budget.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Bogart?
As you can imagine, the resumes that we've received, the essay responses that we got have a lot of similarities. What would you bring to the position that sets you apart from the other applicants?
I appreciate this question. And I got here early and I sat in the parking lot and I was thinking that very question. And I'm unique in that when I left Rehoboth and I came before Carver and I heard, well, you have 10 years experience and you're an attorney, and this person has 10 years experience and has an MPA, we're gonna take this person with the MPA. And I said, interesting, I'll go get an MPA. And not only will I get an MPA, I'll become the graduate assistant, work on organizational theory, and work on, infrastructure, sustainability, and really focus my expertise in these things so I can bring that to my community. I didn't know what I didn't know. You folks are right. Having the MPA was tantamount to being a better manager. I was an attorney. I had 10 years experience. I had done budgets and I had run multi-million-dollar, firms and companies, and I was doing well. I didn't know what I didn't know. And sitting in the parking lot, I wrote this, which means absolutely nothing to anybody. That's what's called the Samuelson condition. There's actually an equation that you can tell how much of a public service is enough, and how much is not enough, and how much is too much. How much salt is too much, how many streetlights is too much, how many bullets should you buy? I mean, there's actually an equation that you can use to determine how much of a public good is enough. I did not know that, but now I do. So what separates me is I have all the experience that everyone else has. I'm an attorney, like some of the other candidates are. 26 years of being an attorney, focusing on employment and municipal, but I'm also an NPA who has been credentialed to the ICMA. There are only 12% of managers in the country that are credentialed to the ICMA, and only 7% in Massachusetts. It takes a very high standard to reach that, and that separates me from other candidates. But what makes me a good candidate for here, I want to work in this environment. I don't want to be front and center. I don't want to be in charge of everything. I want to bring the information to you all, bring these theories and equations to you, because you live here. You have families here, you have relatives here, you have property here. You'll tell me what the answer is, and I'll make it work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marciello, this question's a little bit redundant from a previous one, but I'll ask it anyway. From your experience and observation, what do you think is the single most important characteristic of an effective town administrator?
Knowing what he or she doesn't know, I think that's the most effective. Knowing when to say, yes, no, I'm sorry, I don't know. One cannot be omniscient, one cannot be, the sole authority on anything. I can rebuild my 1971 Mustangs, 351 Cleveland. I wouldn't touch my 2000 and whatever Ford because I don't know. Pardon me. So I know what I don't know, and I know that there are others who do know, and you rely on them, whether it's town council, whether it's the health agent, whether it's a particular member of the board of selectmen who's expert in that area, and then you work collaboratively. As an attorney, and people that don't know attorneys intimately, they think that, oh, you're an attorney, you know everything. I wouldn't know how to divest a corporation. I just wouldn't know how to do it. But I would know who to go get to do that. So I would know where to find the information, where to get the expert. That's, I think, what makes an effective leader.
Thank you. And if I could just ask a quick follow-up to a question I think Mr. Cotter had asked. When you were talking about your experience in Millbury, you mentioned that you brought the bond rating through the roof.
I did.
Do you recall what the bond rating was to when you got there and when you left?
It was, they were just starting to go through it. There's 2 or 3 reasons that it went through the roof. It wasn't just my budget, and I will go into that in a little bit. There was other things I did. It started out A, little a, and it ended up AAA. And the reason for that, there's 25% of the bond that you can actually affect right now. This board can affect 25% of the bond by who you hire and who they are and what credentials they have. That 125%, you get a standard score for, the person has a bachelor's, a different score if the person has a master's, a different score if they're ICMA. That trickles down all the way down to every single one of your people in high positions. If your town clerk is not certified, if your accountant doesn't have the credentials, they don't get the extra points. So A, it affects your bond rating, and B, it affects your insurance. Your insurance goes up. When all these people get their licenses and certifications, the insurance goes down, the bond rating goes up by that amount that you can affect. In Middlebury, I budgeted and forced, and I say forced in the nicest way, every single one of my department heads to go get certified. And they did it incredibly willingly. They were not allowed. The old regime thought that, well, as soon as we train them, they'll leave. They'll go find a job somewhere else. As soon as we give the town accountant, this certification, the town clerk, that certification, they'll go get a job somewhere else for more money. And I said, no, I'm gonna certify them, A, for the bond rating, B, it's good for the town, and it's good for them, it motivates them. It comes right back to you, they become more motivated going to the MMA meetings and getting these certifications, and the whole operation works more efficiently and effectively. So I believe that that is where I would do things differently. I would make sure everyone is certified. I would make sure that everyone is always on top of the law, making sure that they're never getting behind, go to the MMA meetings, and that unto itself affects your bond rating.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens.
Thank you. Can you tell us what your management style is and how that style would help to foster professionalism, employee satisfaction, initiative, and most importantly, self-esteem among department heads and staff?
Not knowing the MPA org theories, I didn't know about Foley, and I didn't know about Mcgovern, and I didn't know about all these things, but it kind of was intuitive that, you know, people do better when they feel better. People do better when they feel appreciated. People do better when they feel like they're contributing. And dovetailing with the prior question, I budgeted and allowed/made everyone go and get their certifications, take courses. I made sure that they were always on top of what they do, learning from others in the profession, learning from experts in the profession, and supporting them with the resources that they need. Now, that's on the management side. But to the question earlier about a good leader, in Rehoboth, we celebrated birthdays, retirements, christenings with cakes and everything else, barbecues, and I funded them out of my own pocket. I brought in caterers and we catered barbecues. In Millbury, we had a mansion. I rented out the mansion, I catered it, I brought in police details, and I even brought in wine and beer and entertainment. And I invited every single employee and their family for the Christmas party. And I did it year after year. It cost me thousands and thousands of dollars. On Secretary's Day or Administrator's Day, I catered that out of my own pocket. So these are things that bring people together. And then I started sunshine funds in every place that I've been, where everyone throws in $5 or $10 a month, and at the end of a quarter or whatever, someone might need convalescence, flowers. Someone might need, congratulations on your new baby flowers. But those things came from us. But if there wasn't something like that, and the pool started getting bigger, we had a family day with bounce houses and balloon animals, being tied. Those are the types of things that I think that and it wasn't funded by any tax dollars. This is all from the people putting in the Sunshine Fund out of their own pocket and me out of my own pocket. These are the types of things that build camaraderie. I'll go one step further. I went to the DLS, Department of Legal Services at the DOR, and I got an opinion saying that I could do this. I actually funded, and it's in my one of my letters to you, one of my answers to you, I funded what was termed a Boys and Girls Club atmosphere at the fire stations. I went and got $5,000 every year appropriated, and I put a nice big screen TV, I put some nice couches, I put food and soda and snacks, and it was ongoing throughout the year. And town meeting, initially, one person stood up and said, well, that's gonna be a Boys and Girls Club atmosphere. And I said, absolutely right. You know what? I want the volunteer firemen to be hanging out at the fire station on a Sunday, eating a hamburger, so when the fire bell goes off, when there's an accident, They don't have to come from their house to the fire station to pick up the fire truck. They're already there. And they're not being forced to be there, they want to be there. So just by that $5,000 appropriation, the firemen felt very appreciative. B, it accomplished exactly what I wanted to accomplish. You know, all of a sudden, people were responding from the firehouse, not from their house. So these are the types of things that you can always look to see. How can you, with very minor changes, bring humanity into the workplace and make people want to be there, appreciate being there, feel appreciated. And so, you know, all these questions really dovetail together, and I'm glad that I get to break them down a little more. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
What do you feel the town administrator's role is in getting the budget prepared for the annual town meeting?
It depends on the town. It depends on the town. If there's a charter, if there's an ordinance, you do what the charter or the ordinance says. I would think that in this town, the Board of Selectmen have the authority in concert with the Finance Committee. And I would think that the way that that would work would be the town administrator would work with a team to develop draft versions of it, bring it before the Board of Selectmen, who eventually get to the point where they're like, yes, this is the way we want it. And then that gets presented to the Finance Committee, who is either going to support it or not support it, and maybe there's some negotiation there, which goes back to the Board of Selectmen for the negotiation. I would think that's how it works here. But if there's some other mechanism, I would do whatever mechanism this town incorporated. I have personally been in charge of 100% of the $53 million budget, all on my plate. I had no problem doing it. I've also worked in the scenario that I just described in Rehoboth. And again, had no problem doing it. So I have the ability to do it in any way that the operation is set up. I believe that this setup is the way I just described, and I'm prepared to work in that setup.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Cotter?
Again, kind of tailing off on Jim's question. I guess this would be more in detail. Please describe your typical budget process as it relates to revenue forecast, departmental expenses, and funding reserve funds. I'll just elaborate a little bit on that, and that is, we've had town administrators that would, you know, you have X amount of money coming in, and it would be devoted to town services first, you know, contractual obligations, things of that nature, and then there were some funds for capital, and then if we had funds left over, say, then you'd look at putting in reserves. And then we've had other philosophies that say, here's my total revenue. I'm going to first put a priority on what do I need to reserve first, and almost taking that money out, and then looking at, now what can I do with town services? Where can I pull stuff from, and things of that nature. So a little more specifics as to what is the philosophy you see going forward when you're trying to put together a town budget.
My philosophy on budgets. All right, you have needs and wants. You always deal with the needs first. And then the wants you get to with whatever you have extra. When I had plenary authority over it, I had the magic wand and I could make every decision. This is how I did it. So this would be a good looking glass into how I think. I undershot my growth dramatically. I undershot my estimated receipts dramatically. I undershot what I believed the state was going to give me. And then I used that number to do my budget, and I balanced my budget. So when I then had this windfall of cash when it was certified, I took a lot of it and put it into the overlay. Why overlay? I'll get to that in a second. Not free cash, put it into overlay. Overlay had already been looked at. We knew how much money we needed to deal with our obligations. So we knew, here's the amount we need. I had way up here. And here's the amount that's coming off, because every year some comes off. Stuff that comes off goes into free cash. It went into overlay because overlay is considered by the DOR and by the auditors as a reserve fund. It's considered stabilization. But it's not stabilization in as much as it does not take a 2/3 vote. You can directly appropriate right from it at town meeting like it's free cash. So you get the benefit of boosting your bond rating and the operational benefit of being able to take it very quickly if you need it for free cash to buy a fire truck to whatever, spend down the tax rate, whatever you want to use it for. So it's free cash, if you will, because you don't need it for overlay. You already know overlay is only needed here. You have all this extra. So it's the equivalent of free cash, but looked at as if it's stabilization. So that's why I put that there. So once I balance my budget, now I have this boatload of free cash and boatload of overlay free cash. I start throwing it into stabilization. I start throwing it into OPEB. I start paying down my debt. I start using it for capital. I fund my bans and bonds before the marijuana money came in, because it took a little while to get all that legislation passed, whatnot. Before the marijuana money came in, I was paying my bans and bonds. I was floating a ban and bond to do $5 million worth of construction, because that's all you can do in a small town like that. $5 million shuts down a third of the town for the whole summer. So I was floating those bans and bonds so they didn't have to go long term. And then starting other stabilization accounts, the capital stabilization. I explained that one was unfunded liability payments, comp time, sick time, buyback, vacation. Because what ends up happening is, let's say the police chief retires, and in his contract it says that he gets to buy back all the sick time. Well, that gentleman hasn't taken a sick day in 13 years. So, he's got like 9 months of sick time on the books. You didn't budget for that, so, where's that money coming from? You'd have to call a special town meeting, because he gives you like 3 weeks notice, by the way, I'm gonna retire at the end of June. What? Now you have to call a special town meeting to give him his $80,000 buyout. Well, I would have a fund for it right here. So that's how I do my budgeting. But more into the weeds of it, I start for where I have been, we had our town meetings in April and May. So I would start in September with a very loose budget. I'd pass out all the sheets to all the department heads, tell them, give me your wish, break down what you want. We'd meet, and it would be, a definite no. This is a no, no. Redo this, we'll meet in another 3-4 weeks. So by November, now we're getting, okay, these 5 things we can have, but these 8 things, no. Go back and do it again. By December, we're actually using numbers, we're actually getting it close. And by January, we're in front of the board and finance committee getting buy-in. And the way I did it was I always had the finance chair on my team. Because I knew I wasn't gonna get buy-in unless the finance chair knew what was going on right from the get-go.
Sure.
So I had the finance chair on my team from the get-go. I had a liaison from the board of selectmen on my team, and the finance director and HR director. So that's how we handled it. By the time we got to the end of January, it was being printed, so that way we could mail it all out and be voting on it in April.
Great. And one just quick follow-up question is in your letter, you talked about being able to reduce, I think it was renegotiated healthcare contracts for a 3% reduction.
3.2%, absolutely.
How were you able to do that? I'm just briefly.
I came in and they had already gone out to bid and come back with a 16.7% increase with Fallon. That was the only bid they got, was 16.7%. I tore it up because there was a little caveat in there that if we don't come to an agreement, it won't sunshine for 6 months. So, I still had 6 months to play. And I immediately went out and called all of the players that I knew and said, please send me in a 1 year, moderate increase, 3, 4, 5, 6% or something, because they're not gonna have enough time to really look at the weeds. And then that will give me a whole year to do this process correctly. And Maya came in and they gave me a 1 year, 4%. So I went from 16.7 down to 4 for 1 year. But if anyone knows 30B, there's an exception in 30B. You do not have to have a fair process with insurance. Nor do you have to do it with attorneys, nor do you have to do it with engineers, nor do you have to do it with some other professional services. You can actually have an open bidding war. So for instance, if you're selling your old police vehicles, and it's a sealed bid, it's how most people do it. And you open up the bids, and this guy says, I'm gonna give you $1,500 for that police vehicle. You rip that one up, and this guy says, I'm gonna give you $1,700 for this police vehicle. You can take the $1,700 and be done with it. Or you can call the first guy back and say, hey, your friend over here just bid 17, what are you gonna bid? I'll bid 18. Then you call him, you just bid 18, what are you gonna bid? And you can have them fight against each other. Next thing you know, you're getting $2,900 for something you're only gonna get $1,500. You can do the exact same thing with insurance, in the opposite. You can literally say, give me your bid, and then you don't want to do it. And they're like, then I don't want to deal with you. Give me your bid, and yes, make it a good one, because I'm going to tell your competitor what your bid is. And so when it was all said and done, I stayed with Maya second time around, and the next year was a reduction. So the first year was an increase of 4. The next year was a reduction of 3.2 with a guarantee of no higher than the middle of the lowest tier for the next 2 cycles. And the lowest tier historically was 1 to 3%. So I was probably going to be at 2.5% in year 2, 2.5% in year 3. And I was perfectly okay with that. And the way I did it was I had them really sharpen their pencil, because I knew a few of the bad cases were coming off. I said, you're looking at old data, and I can look at old data too and make a really bad bid. But this is the new data. We have a couple of people that came off, so new data says we're not gonna have those. Historically, they're not gonna be there. So sharpen your pencil. And I did the exact same thing with the liability insurance. And with both insurance plans, absolutely 0.0 change. No difference in doctors, no difference in coverage, no difference in co-pays, no difference in formularies for medicine. The only difference was, instead of paying X amount of dollars, we paid Y amount of dollars. And going back to your budget question, I did not pass that all on to the people using it. I passed the majority of it on. I took the rest of it and put it into a pseudo stabilization account.
Sure.
Why? Because I know at some point in time we're going to get a 5 or 6 or 7% increase, and I will have that money over there that I can backfeed it, so that instead of having a 5% increase, it's only a 2% increase. So I gave everyone, instead of a 3.2% reduction, I gave them like a 2.5% reduction or something, whatever it was. And they were happy with that. Everyone was happy. It was more money in their pocket. And the other thing I did was I took all of the retirees who were using Blue Cross Blue Shield, I forced them over to Medicare. And I said, we will pay 100% of your Part B. So you'll actually get a better program. You're going to get 100% coverage and 100% medicine. And it's going to save us. Your payment will go down, and our payment will go down. So with both those things, I was able to reduce by more than 3.2%. I did the exact same thing with the liability. I pit them against each other. I said, sharpen the pencil and give you the best you can.
Great, thank you.
Just before we get on to our next question, I want to just make everyone aware that we are starting to fall substantially behind our schedule here. So if we could all just be as concise as possible as we move forward. Ms. Bogart, you are next.
Early on, you mentioned that you were aware of the solar development in town and the large project in North Carver. Projects like that can always come with the hypothetical big tax dollars. So do you see an influx in new commercial tax revenue as a good opportunity to lower property taxes, or to have more money to have a higher budget to spend on capital projects? Where do you see an influx in commercial tax revenue going?
The answer is yes. So,
Okay.
the answer is yes. There's no one way to do it. It depends on what your situation is. So it's a really good problem to have. If you are in a situation like Millbury was, where you literally have roads that have not been worked on for 20 years and bridges that are closed, you have an urgent need that needs to be addressed right now. And then maybe 3, 4, 5 years, we can switch that. But right now, we have bridges that are closed. If you're in a situation where I look around here, we have beautiful buildings and the roads, I drove around and the roads aren't horrible, they're in nice shape. I think maybe we can deal with the tax rate, and we can deal with maybe longer term planning. What are we looking for down the road? As soon as we get a large scale development, are we going to need a new ladder truck? Because it doesn't have to be high, they reach out too. Or are we gonna need maybe an increase in the size of the water mains over there? Those are things you need to plan for. So the answer is there is no one right answer. It's a great problem to have. What you need to do is sit down with the experts and all of the stakeholders and come up with a long-range plan on what you're gonna do and how you're gonna do with it. And then that plan needs to have a policy voted by this board. And that policy needs to be applied. Because if you have a plan and no policy, the plan isn't a plan.
Sure. Okay.
So,
All right. Thank you, and I think that your statement leads right into our next question. Are you familiar with our Select Board financial management policies, and what are your thoughts regarding them?
I think every policy, I am familiar with it. I think every policy is good and every policy can be better. You never want to be myopic. Policies need to be stringent enough that they are a policy, but not so strict that you can't address unforeseen events like COVID or like the recession of '09. So you always need to have a safety net because these things will happen. And I'll go one step further. I don't know how many of you were around. I know Mr. Mercer was around. We had 9 seat cuts in 8, 9, 10. And 9 seat cuts, for anyone who doesn't know what it is, the state gives you their aid. And it's your money, and it's in your account. And then the state giveth, and the state taketh away. All of a sudden, the state says, we have got an unbalanced budget, something happened, we need to cut. Well, they don't need to cut them, they need to cut you. They take their money back. And you have already entered into contracts, you've already bought equipment, you've already started projects, and all of a sudden, the funding just evaporated. So these types of unforeseen events need to also be foreseen. So I would say that that would be something I would want to address in your policies.
Okay, but have you read the policies on the website?
I have read them, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens.
Thank you. We have just completed our 2022 Open Space and Recreation Plan Survey,
Okay.
our Open Space and Recreation Plan Update Committee. And an overwhelming majority of respondents to this survey feel that Carver's rural character is worth preserving.
Okay.
Do you agree? And if so, how do you plan to help preserve Carver's unique rural character?
Whether I agree or not is irrelevant because I'm not in a position to have a position on that. As the administrator, especially as someone who's not a resident, my position on whether the town wants one thing or another is irrelevant. What is relevant is the town wants something, so now we have to do it. Assuming that that is where the town wants to go, it will be my job to effectuate any changes that this board or the town meeting votes. Now, I can tell you in my town where I live, I'm very much involved in open space preservation. You don't educate it. You very rarely send a police officer or fireman or a plow to it. So by spending money up front, you actually save money in the long run, dramatically save money in the long run. If you preserve open space, and especially if you use it through other funds like CPA funds and things like that, or free cash that you have, if you can preserve open space, make it recreational space, change the zoning or whatever, your budget gets much more stable. Because I have seen it in my town, and I would assume you've seen it here. We had cranberry bogs that now have houses on them. When it was a cranberry bog, it was, industrial taxation. Now that it's houses, it's services that's going out. So instead of getting a small tax in, we have a large tax out. So if we could have preserved that cranberry bog, we would have saved our budget. So my personal position, I can only speak to my personal position in Rehoboth. Because when I'm here, my position is going to be your position. And if the majority of this board votes something, that's how I will go about it.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
Okay, the town administrator appoints people to various boards and committees in Carver. Would you have a problem rescinding an appointment you made? If no, what would be the reason or reasons you wouldn't rescind it? And if yes, what would be the reasons you would?
I have done that. I inherited people, but there was no outward reason for me to not reappoint. Here it is June, time for reappointments, the last May meeting, time for reappointments. And here are all these names, and I've been there for a matter of 2-3 months. There's no reason for me to say, well, I'm not going to reappoint this person, so I reappoint the person. Well, fast forward a year and a half later, I now know the person, I know the job, I now have attempted to have some corrective, discussions with the person, and things weren't being corrected. So I have said I'm not going to reappoint you when your appointment comes up. And that's not something you do lightly. I've done it for 15 years, and in 15 years, it's only occurred once in 15 years. And I don't do it lightly, but sometimes you have to address what you have to address.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cotter?
Excuse me. We talked a little bit about state aid. What's your methodology for predicting state aid, and how do you manage that resource when you're trying to finalize the town budget?
I have found that House 1 is usually the most accurate. Just historically, House 1 is most accurate. The governor's is pie in the sky, the Senate's is, oh my God, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. And House 1 is usually somewhere in between, and that's usually about what you're gonna get. So I take the House 1, which comes out mid-January, like January 20th or something like that. They usually do it at the MMA meeting in Boston. They announce it. And by that point in time, I'm getting ready to print my budget, because it needs to be finalized. So what I do is I speak to my local rep going into it, get in his or her ear and say, where do you project House 1 to be? Because I need to know that number in November, not December. And so they usually have a good idea of what they're going to argue over. And what they're going to argue over is always going to be higher than what they're going to come up with. So I'll take what they're arguing over in November, reduce that by some amount, and then cut that dramatically with the number I'm going to use. Because it's probably going to come in above the number that I use. And that's how I do my budget.
Thank you.
All right. All right, Ms. Bogart?
Sarah touched upon rural character, so I'm gonna pivot. If a resident calls or emails you with a problem, how long does it take you to get back to that person?
It's a fantastic question. If a resident phoned or called me, I'm assuming that there's someone below me, whether it be an administrative assistant or someone who's answering the phone often. That person might be able to address it directly, like on the phone when they answer the phone. If the question can't get answered at that level, it gets sent to me. And the truthful answer is it depends on what's going on. If I'm in the middle of the budget, it's probably going to take a couple of weeks to get back. Just because I'm in the middle of the budget and, most of the time, it's not a 5-minute conversation or a 5-minute, meeting. It's something I need to research, it's something I have to go find out about, or whatever. So the way I would handle that is, I would delegate that to someone that might be able to address the issue immediately while I needed the time to finish whatever urgent thing I was doing on behalf of the town and the board, and then I would come back to it and address it. If it wasn't in a cycle like that, as soon as I can get to it. You wouldn't believe how many emails the town administrator gets, and I use modern technology to filter that. What I do is I actually have 2 email addresses. I have one email address that is public and one email address that is not public. The email address that is public, you get that inundated with, no word of a lie, 300-400 emails a day. And I'm not exaggerating. You get 300 to 400 emails a day, and probably about 195 of them are, please buy this product, or we can help you with that product. But you still have to filter through them. The other 10-20% are things that would be going on that people are just talking to one another, and you're just part of the chain. And so now you've got to filter through that, because you really weren't even involved in that conversation. They just wanted you to know. And then you've got 4 or 5% that you should be addressing right now. In order to filter that, the second email address is all of you all department heads, all stakeholders and issues that we're dealing with. They go directly to that one. That one chimes on my phone. It's instantaneous. I know what's happening. So that those are being addressed throughout the day. The one over here is almost like a spam folder, and what I do is I have my assistant weed through that. So if 1 or 2 or 3 important need to be addressed emails, she'll send those over to the other one. And the other way I address it through, if anyone knows C-Click Fix, it's a system that's not expensive, that literally is on the website, and if someone goes down the road and sees a pothole, they just note it. The GPS picks up the location, they can take a picture of it, the picture gets uploaded, it goes right to the right person. So that email doesn't have to come to me and I don't have to forward it. It literally goes to the right person, the pothole's fixed. You see, you click, it gets fixed. Potholes, dog barks, lights that are out, all these things that someone would call me and fill up the email, that literally all I'm gonna do is send it to the right person. So I use those types of, and I can give you probably 5 others. I know we're in a hurry, so I don't want to beat this to death. I can give you 5 or 6 other modern technology systems like C-Click Fix and Raven and others, Nextdoor, that I use.
Okay.
And these are things that get people immediate responses without having to weed through 500 emails.
All right. Mr. Marciello, does the working environment have an impact on employee productivity? Why? And what do you think your role is in establishing that environment?
You have just hit on Maslow's theory. That is exactly what happens. Everyone wants to feel appreciated, everyone wants to have self-worth, everyone wants to feel like they're contributing, everyone wants to feel like they are they're achieving their potential. And we need to effectuate anything that we can do to help that along the line, whether it be giving them resources, whether it be giving them encouragement, whether it be giving them time off, whatever the situation is. So that way they can achieve what they need to achieve with what they have available to them. And they progressively go up that escalon until they reach full fulfillment. So the role of any manager is to stay on top of that, whether it be through HR, whether it be through finance, whatever the situation is, get the people what they need, whether it be personnel, whether it be equipment, whether it be knowledge, and help them do what they're there to do in a way that keeps them satisfied.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens?
Mr. Chair, in the interest of time, I'm not going to ask John's question, but I will skip to my final question.
All right.
What is the professional accomplishment that you're most proud of and the one that you most regret?
Well, I wouldn't say my accomplishment I regret, so my failure, I would say. I'll get to that. The little things I'm most proud of, just helping people along the way. I could name 1,000 of those, but I think the one that I really hang my hat on is twofold. I turned an $18,000 DEP fine, we were being fined for something that happened before I got there, into a $143,000 grant which produces millions of dollars of solar voltaic energy. So I literally turned an $18,000 fine into DEP buying us solar panels, which produces electricity for ourselves. Pretty happy with that one. Also, having marijuana legislation passed, which funds all of these projects without taxation. But the biggest one was, I found a need in town. The pop water and baseball associations were tearing up the local fields with their practices, and the high school was always having to repair them. So I approached the 501c3 chairs, and I said, what are we gonna do about this? And they said, well, we have $300,000 worth of seed money, we're looking to buy some land. Okay, so now they'll buy some land and have a bunch of trees on it, we're still 20 years out before they're doing anything on it. I said to them, nope, what you're gonna do is you're gonna rent the town hall. Behind the town hall, it was an old Nike site, this was where they launched the missiles. I said, they launch the missiles, big field, we're gonna turn that into a football field, baseball field, track complex. And I said, you're gonna rent it for $1 for 99 years. You're gonna spend your $300,000 in seed money to buy the things you need. We're gonna get all of you made special town employees so you can be on our insurance and use our equipment if you're licensed. So in-kind services, donations, tax-deductible donations, and people doing the work themselves, we built an entire football, baseball complex with irrigation, 4 feet of loam, fencing all around, light towers, bleachers, concession stand, a track, netting all around, dugouts that are cement. This thing's gorgeous. And that segued into a memorial. So they wanted a war memorial there too. So that segued into that. So I'm and zero tax dollars. Zero tax dollars. So I am most proud of looking at these things and doing it. And I'll leave with one more and then I'll go to my failure. There was going to be a cell tower 50 feet outside of somebody's window. 50 feet outside of their bathroom window. And it was going to be put there because they could put it there. And this guy was like, I'm gonna have this big cell tower 50 feet outside my bathroom window. I knew I was coming up to town meeting, so I called a special town meeting before the town meeting. And I had the town rezone an overlay district to have that tower put on town land. Oddly enough, right where that football, baseball field is down the street. It's in a little corner. So instead of having this cell tower 50 feet outside of this guy's window, we put it in the middle of the woods behind town hall where you can't see it. Nobody knows it's there. Well, now you can see it because they put a football, baseball field there. And the town collects all the revenue. Win-win. So where did I fail? 2 failures. 1, I looked at you have, in good public management, you have the tenets, efficiency, economy, effectiveness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I looked at economy and I put it way at the top. And I looked at a salt bid that if I joined the salt bid, I could save like $1 zillion. I thought that was the best thing in the world. Doesn't do you any good if you can't get the salt. So effectiveness in that realm should be higher up than economy. Sometimes it's better to have the bullets than to save the money on the bullets. What ended up happening was we entered into a consortium that during major events, they would deliver the salt. But the problem was the salt was over here, and Rehoboth is at the end of 44. The company would go pick up the salt and keep delivering it here, because they could get 3, 4, 5 trips to this town, and only 1 trip to Rehoboth, because the miles were longer. So they looked, would I rather get 4 trips to this town or 1 trip to Rehoboth? So we ended up sending our own trucks instead of plowing to go pick up our salt to turn around to plow and salt our roads. So I learned right then and there, don't always look at the bottom dollar. You need to look at what is the mission and be as effective as you can. And I learned from that. The same exact scenario came when we had a voice over internet protocol, VoIP. You can do telephones over the internet. And I was approached, we can save like 80% of our phone bill. This is back when copper wire was everywhere. If we just changed over to voice over internet protocol and used Comcast to give us the phones. Well, I looked at that and I said, if all of our phones and our 911 and everything else is over that one coax wire, what happens if someone cuts that coax wire, gets hit by a telephone pole, we have a lightning strike or whatever? I said, no, I want to be like the A-10 Warthog that has 42 redundancies in it and you can't shoot it out of the air. So instead, I did transfer over some of the administrative lines, but I kept all of the emergency lines bifurcated. Some were copper, some were VoIP, some were cellular. So I had redundancies. And sure enough, Sandy and Irene came down the pike and knocked out our police station both times for days. But we were able, because we had so many redundancies, we didn't lose our 911, we had cell connections, we didn't lose our communications, because even though we had no electricity, we didn't have, and the copper wires down, we did have the VoIP for a while. So I learned my lesson that economy isn't always the best. Sometimes you need to look at the mission and make sure effectiveness is there too.
So I have a quick, how is that a failure?
The first one is a failure, the salt.
Well, you said you had 2 failures.
Well, the second one could have been a failure that I turned into not a failure. I apologize.
I see.
It was a failure looking at me, and I zigged instead of zagged. Had I gone 100% VoIP, we probably would have been in the worst, same bad position.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Cotter, you have several questions that we had found out among the board, because you had a few more than some others. So in the interest of time, why don't we go to you and let you ask those questions, and perhaps we can consolidate some of them, and that way we can get through. I think it starts with question number 17 that Sarah was going to ask.
All right. Can you provide an example of when you set goals for your subordinates and how you monitor their performance to reach the desired results?
I'm sorry, Mr. Carver.
Sorry.
I can't hear you, sir.
Sorry, microphone. Can you please provide an example of when you set goals for your subordinates and how you monitored their performance to reach the desired results? What guidance and direction did you find most effective?
I always do that. And in one example with the town planner, I hired her and I put in her contract that 30% of her contract had to be finding grants. And I wanted the grants to dovetail into the economic development that we were doing with the infrastructure. And then I set goals. And I gave bonuses that she could reach. I almost did like a Patriots, you're gonna get a salary of this, but if you get 50 touchdowns, you get that. And if you make the Super Bowl, you get that. I built that into her contract. that incentivize even more. And with even lower subordinates, as I mentioned earlier, I made sure that everyone got their certifications. And when they got their certifications, it automatically got them raises. So setting goals is something that you can incentivize as well. And it's a win-win because it brings back to the town by them having this more knowledge, and it makes them more motivated to go forward. So even with the small things like in job reviews, you always do that. You know, this is what I want you to do next year, and you know, your 1% could be a 2% if you hit these benchmarks, and you can do that with your salaried employees. You can't necessarily do that with the union employees, but with my salaried employees, I say, you hit this benchmark, it's a 1%. You hit this benchmark, it's a 2%. You hit this benchmark, it's a 3%. And you know, you can incentivize it. So that's how I've always done it.
Thank you.
And if you just look, Mr. Carter, at your remaining questions, I think some of them sort of dovetailed into
Yeah,
things that have
I
already
don't-
been answered, but.
Yeah, I think we already talked about 19 to death, so that's fine. Next one I think is Jen.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so are you all set with 18 and 19? Those are all set?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot of it.
All
Yeah,
right,
19 I'm all set on.
all right, Ms.
Yeah.
Bogart.
Yeah.
Do you have any sort of financial or professional relationship with someone who lives or works in Carver?
Not that I'm aware,
Okay.
but it has happened. I learned in Millbury that my brother-in-law was doing environmental studies. And I had no idea because his company wasn't in his name wasn't his name, it was just like John Smith, you know, whatever. And as soon as I learned it, I disclosed with the town clerk and I disclosed with the Secretary of State, I believe it is. And I had no dealings whatsoever in any decisions that he did with any of his, he was doing site reviews for wetlands and things. But like I said, I have no knowledge of anybody, but if I find out, I will do that exact same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Great. My last question was actually one that involved community involvement, but I think that's been answered previously. But I would like, if you don't mind, to hear a little bit more about something you spoke about. I think it was on Ms. Hewen's questions about an issue where you turned a DEP fine into an income-producing
Excellent.
type. And I'd like to hear a little more about that, if you don't mind.
This is a feather in my cap. I love talking about this issue. I got a letter saying that the town had encroached on some DEP land without permission, and we were being fined $1,800. What had happened was, in the 90s, before I was even an administrator, before I was even living there, they built baseball fields, softball fields right next to the town dump. At the time it was a dump. They capped over the landfill, but they never divided the lots. So where they were building the baseball fields was part of lot A, part of lot B, part of lot C, and the lot continued after the fencing and onto the landfill. Now, they were nowhere near the landfill, but on paper, the lot continued on. So I looked at the law and I saw that there was a loophole in the law. Here's my lawyer feather cap. That said, if a municipality had a DEP fine, they could ask for a loophole leniency where we don't actually pay the fine. We do a project instead that they approve of. And so I approached them and they said, okay, you can do an $18,000 project. I said, okay. And I then looked and saw that we had, back up. Another loophole, you could ask them to reduce the fine in half because we really didn't do anything to effectuate anything. I mean, our fence was hundreds of feet away from the landfill. They weren't playing ball on the landfill, but just on paper. So they reduced the fine down to $9,000 and then allowed us to do a $9,000 project. I then found that we had green energy credits because the town was using green energy for its town electricity. It just so happened to add up to like $10,000. So I took the DEP's green energy credit and said, apply that toward my project. My project is going to be, I want to hire an engineer who will actually draw plans for solar arrays on all of our buildings. Knowing that at the time, this was in the early 2000s, everyone was asking for grants to design projects. You know, they wanted a grant to how much can we do and where can we put it. I said, I want actual blueprints. So when a grant comes up, I can submit a blueprint, win the award, and get it built. And that's exactly what happened. So I had all of these blueprints in a file cabinet, and when a grant came about, I put solar heat, hot water, and voltaic on the COA. So the heating, the electricity, and the hot water was all free on the COA building, and we actually got more money back because of what it was producing. It was actually more than they were using. And I put a solar array on the DPW building, which didn't cover all of their electricity because you can imagine they have humongous generators and compressors, but it certainly offset by a lot. So when it all came down to it, it was a net plus to us that we weren't heating or electrifying or hot water at the COA, and we were not paying for all of our electricity at the DPW. And that came from what we should have been writing a check for $18,000.
Thank you. Mr. Cotter, you have two other questions, 23 and 24. I don't know if you think you've heard answers previously to those, or if you want to touch on one.
Well, yeah, if you could you share an experience when you applied new technology to improve town services or increased efficiencies within a particular department?
See, Click, Fix, Rave, something one, Red One, something like that, Next Door. These are all technologies that you can use, and the Rave is like a reverse 311. When you drive into an area, your GPS knows that you're there. And my system will ping anyone that's in that area to tell you that the road is closed on Maple Street, or we're about to blast on Anawan Street, or there's an accident on this street, whatever. So just by you having your location on your phone, if you signed up for this service on our webpage, as soon as you enter one of those geolocations, you'll get a push notice of whatever's important. We also use that as a push notice, as a general push notice to everyone in town. Everyone in town, if you're in the boundaries of our town, your cell phone is going to get a push notice saying, tonight is special town meeting, please show up. Or, COVID outbreak, please see the webpage. Or Amber Alert. We all get the Amber Alerts, right? But we can do our own. So I've used that, and when we're talking how much money, it's like $4,000 a year. It's not a lot of money. And when you have $1 million in free cash, $4,000 in the service that people get is dramatic. And then the other ones are like Next Door and whatnot. And I also use the back door to all of the social media. You can see when people are interacting with you. Like if you have a post and you have a lot of comments, you can see and get data and metadata from that, all those interactions. And you can then use that information to guide your message and or how you're going to do things going forward. Simplest one, post at 11:55. Just take my word for it. Put all of your posts, if you want people to read your posts, do it right before lunch. And I'm telling you, you'll see that if you did a post, the secretary came in or the intern came in, did it 8 o'clock, it gets buried under all the other spam and no one sees it till they get home, and by that point in time it's too late. The meeting is already happening. They're already in their pajamas. They're not going. You post it at 11:55. What does everyone do when they're sitting at their desk? They pull up their phone and they log on Facebook, and there's the first thing. The town of Carver is an important message.
Thank you.
Mr. Carter, about question 24, did you want to ask
Yeah,
that? And if I could just ask you both, we are really behind,
Sure.
so we could must be as brief as possible on these last two questions.
Sure. One question had to do with, every town administrator has to negotiate contracts. And I'm just curious, well, I have a secondary question, but let's just, that this came up. When you talked about your revenue projections and how you kind of undercut them, and then that either sometimes produces a significant free cash number at the end of the year or whatnot, how does that play into negotiating contracts when you're, a possible union might turn around and say, well, we have this extra cash every single year.
It's never used for operational. Unless you
No, I know, but that's predicting your revenue. If you're kind of coming low in your revenue, if I'm sitting there on the other side trying to negotiate a contract, I'm going to say, well, the revenue projections are usually pretty low. Thinking about what do we have for raise appropriate, revenue to pay operating expenses.
It's going to be the 2.5% plus growth and overrides and debt exclusions. The difference in that is your growth. I've undercut my growth. So yes, I could use my growth in my operating, but I'm not going to. I'm going to use the vast majority of it. If my growth is going to be 1.5, I'm going to use 900,000. So the other 600,000 is going to be free cash. And what have I done? I've used growth for what it should be used, keep up with what we need, but I've also planned for capital. I also have 600,000 that I can do whatever with. Buy a fire truck, buy police cruisers, and I always try to plan 2-1-2-1 with the police cruisers. 2 this year, 1 next year. 2 this year, 1 next year. And you have a capital plan for fire trucks, you have a capital plan for dump trucks and plows. So that's where your free cash is going. So your question is, how would I negotiate? We walk in and I tell them, here's how much money we have. And this is how much money we have. It's what's going to town meeting. If they want to stand up at town meeting and say, look at all this free cash, let's backfill our whatever budget, our police, fire, rescue, whatever, DPW with cash, town meeting is going to slaughter.
Yes, I know, yeah.
So it's just a bad idea. No, we're going to stay within our 2.5% plus reasonable growth. That's our pot of money for operational. We put that over here and we say, here was your last budget, we're gonna add 2.5% plus growth, that's your next budget. Every other thing that we deal with is money. You want boots, it's money. You want a day off, it's money. You want training, it's money. You want a raise, it's money. Everything is money, and it's a la carte. You then say, you've got, to your son or daughter, you got $20 to go to the gift shop, at the museum. Spend the $20 any way you want. You want to spend it on one plush toy, that's great. You want to buy candy, that's great. You have $20. The exact same way of the negotiation. You have this much money, and everything that you have put on the table, even we want extra boots, that's money. Those cost money. So that's how I negotiate.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And finally, Ms. Bogart.
I'm good.
You all set?
Yep.
All right, thank you. Mr. Marciello, is there anything else you would like the board to know that we think we haven't touched on?
I appreciate the board's time. The only thing I want to leave with the board is things that came out during this meeting. I am positive that all 3 candidates can do this job. I'm positive that all 3 candidates have experience doing this job. I know one candidate you're familiar with, he's been here already. The question then becomes, why me? Why would you choose me? And my answer that I would like you to consider is, not only can I do this job, I have done this job, but I would do it differently than others because what makes me different brings that to the table, if you will. That was inarticulate, but I have an MPA, I have 15 years of direct experience in a town just like this. I have 26 years as an attorney dealing with land use and employment, and this is the type of town I want to land. I want to be, for the next 12 to 15 years, working in an agricultural town that has growth, that has good capital planning, that has an involved board of selectmen, that doesn't just say, you know, we have our own jobs and you tell us what to do. But that's not what I want. What I want articulate, intelligent, involved professionals at every level, and we work as a team to move the important work forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the board? All right, thank you, Mr. Marciello. We really appreciate it.
You have a pleasant.
We will be in touch soon. We will be making a decision relatively soon on this. And
Mr. Chairman?
absolutely. And we will be in recess for about 5 minutes.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
You had really good questions. You really did.
Thank you very much.
Set?
All right, we are back in session.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, you know Mr. Fennessy. Rob has a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. He's also an attorney. He has served as a TA in Kingston and Boylston, I believe, Boylston for a few years. He's also been one of you for a number of years. He's been a board member in Plainville. Rob Fennessy.
All right, thank you, folks. Mr. Fennessy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And before we start, just a brief announcement. I've been informed that Area 58 is having some type of modulation problem, so the picture is a little bit choppy on the live feed, but I am told that that won't affect the YouTube video. So if you're trying to watch this at home and you're having a little bit difficulty with the feed, you will be able to watch it later on YouTube, and it will be much clearer and the sound will be much better. And Area 58 is working to correct that problem, but I don't know when it will be corrected. So with that, Mr. Fennessy, once again, welcome. What we're doing here is sort of very similar to the last time when you interviewed for the interim position. We're working our way around the board and asking questions, and at the end, you'll have an opportunity to tell us anything that you think might be important that we haven't touched on.
Okay.
Do you have any questions before we begin?
I don't.
All right. Then we will start. And I think some of us have questions that are a little bit different for you than for the other town administrators, because you have been here for a time, and we've gotten to know you a little bit, and you've gotten to know the town. So I guess for myself, could you please share with us what you've learned about our community in the time that you've been here? And from your perspective, what are its strengths, what are its weaknesses, and what are its unique characteristics? And then how do your skills and experiences apply to that?
Okay, so I've been here since January 1st. That's the interim. I came and I actually discussed with you that I was only here for the interim position. And over the time of two and a half months, I grew to love this town as my own. What I learned about this town, I learned that it has a great citizenry. It has a board of selectmen, select board that I feel comfortable with, that have differing opinions, which is great, but come together too. I learned that the department heads are fantastic. This is the kind of town that, as a professional, that I was looking for to land in, to work my career as a town administrator. So, what did I learn? I learned that obviously the agricultural aspect of the town, which is very important to the people. I learned that departments come together to help other departments, and I saw that with the capital plan group, where department heads were giving up items to give to another department. I'm sorry. So, and how does that fit into my background? So, one of the things in my background is that I worked diligently as an attorney, as a town administrator, as a selectman, as a father, as a husband, all those things put together, that you know that communication is like the number one thing. And my strength is my communication and my collaboration with others. And I think I can put that together with the town's needs going forward, as I have in these past 4 or 5 months, and build it all up. And that's kind of the goal. So I hope that answered your question. It was kind of multiple.
It was several questions in one, it was.
But,
Thank you, Mr. Fennessy. Ms. Hewins.
So, Mr. Fennessy, can you tell us why you want to come to or stay in Carver in particular?
So again, I don't want to repeat myself on
It's okay.
what I just said, but I came to Carver because I really had a lot of practice, and I really missed doing municipal governance. That's something I love doing. It's something that's built into my psyche after being 18 years as a select person, and also town administrator in a few towns. And I missed that. So when I saw the opening for the interim, I thought, well, it's a good way to kind of get back into it and get into an interim position. And then it grew on me. The people grew on me. The departments, the employees. So many have said, you have to apply for the full-time permanent position. And I'm like, yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And ultimately, I did, because I see this as a part of my fabric now. The town's fabric and my fabric, like melding together. So that's why I came, and that's why I want to stay.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
Okay, as you know, the town administrator appoints people to various boards and committees here in Carver, and whoever fills this position will be having a lot coming up in this next year. Would you have a problem rescinding an appointment that you made? If yes, why? And if no, why?
Okay, rescinding, you mean prior to the,
No, an
prior to the
appointment, an
reappointment?
appointment that you would make coming up.
Okay, so in like July 1.
Correct.
No, I wouldn't have a problem. If that person who has applied or is sitting in a position that they're not doing what is in the best interest of the town of Carver, I would have no problem. Just like I would have no problem if there was an employee who's doing something terrible that harmed the town of Carver, that if they couldn't be like rehabilitated to do the right thing, I would have no problem removing that person. I
Okay.
think that's the duty of a town administrator at that level, is to make sure that those that are appointed by the town administrator are proper people to be sitting in those positions. Because those are all very important positions. Every committee, every commission has important duties to do. And if they don't have that right person, sometimes that can really have an effect on the whole committee. So that's what I would look at.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carter.
Well, I think you've covered the question of my question about, what made you decide to choose Carver, so I'm all set.
All right.
Yeah.
Ms. Bogart.
Okay, so as you can imagine, the candidates that we've seen have similar resumes, similar essay question answers. What sets you apart from them? What would you bring to the position that is different from the others that we're seeing today?
It's a good question. What brings me apart from the others? I don't know the others, so I don't know what they wrote or said or what did. But what brings, I think it goes to my strength of collaboration and getting morale up. I mean, from day one when I got here, I think I tried diligently to bring the morale up in the town through the town employees, department heads, and that filters out to the citizens, how they can deal with town government. Because sometimes that's always concerns and complaints, is that, oh, I called the town hall and they didn't answer and nobody helped me or something. I've worked to make sure that each employee knows that there's a point of what they have to do and how they have to do that. And part of that is with a smile, with showing that we want to help them, not take away from them, not be an obstructionist to them. So I think my difference from others is that I have this benefit of having this knowledge of the town for these 4 months, 5 months. Time's clicking away. And I can build on that. And that's kind of where I stand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Fennessy, from your time here, what do you see as the 3 biggest challenges facing the town in the next few years? And how does your time as the interim town administrator help you to deal with those challenges?
Okay, so challenges. One obviously is always the budget. That's always the challenge, to make sure the revenue is there to offset the cost of running a town. So then how do we do that? We try to bring in more revenue, or we try to reduce some of the budgets that may have some excess in it. That's always the number one challenge. The second biggest challenge I see forward, a couple I took care of. One was the veteran services, and one was the council on aging, getting part-timers into full-time positions to help the most vulnerable in our community. One of the next challenges I see is we're an agricultural community with a lot of issues. We have a lot of conservation issues. Next goal would be to look at that conservation agent. I don't think I haven't ever been in a town, and most of the towns all have full-time conservation agents. We have a part-time. So one of the things I would look at over the next year, it might be over 2 years, is to increase from 19 hours, which is, I think, woefully inadequate for that position, having served on the Conservation Commission in my own town. Have that build up either next year, because the budget's already set for this coming fiscal year. But over next year, if we can't afford a 35-hour week, then maybe go into 28 hours that year, 4 days a week. And then the following year, maybe then go into the 35 hours. But I think that's the second issue I would look at getting corrected. There are 3 issues. The third issue is retaining employees. I don't want Carver to become a training site for other towns. I mean, we have lost employees on the highway department, we've lost employees in the town hall that go to other communities that have somewhat little better benefits and more money, obviously. But I know that's always the balancing act, is the money and what you can pay the employees. So somewhere along that line, we have to get into that middle section of our comp towns, so that we're not at the bottom and that they'll want to stay here. Because building an employee force is important, and having that consistency over time, instead of having people come and go, come and go, come and go. So that'd be my third.
And if I could just ask as a follow-up, do you see the North Carver project as a challenge?
I think that's a challenge. That's the big challenge, once it starts going. It was a challenge that this board had dealt with over the last few years. And going forward, now that town meeting has passed certain things, that'll be a challenge, working on getting that done properly, and working with those who can get that done properly, like the town planner and others, the IPA and the building inspector and so forth. So
Okay.
I think that's obviously a challenge of getting that on the road.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ewens?
Thank you. And Mr. Finney, don't take this the wrong way, but I want folks to hear you at home, so maybe you could pull that microphone a little closer. Thank you. And to move into my question, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate the, whatever it was that you did that managed to allow our interim town planner to now be our permanent town planner. We've been needing a permanent town planner who is very good for a long time.
And it was nice that he comes from the town and I was the town administrator. So, and I wooed him here.
Whatever you did. So, this question is, so I'll just start off. What is your management style? I think I know what your management style is, but I'd like for you to explain that and how that particular style will foster professionalism, employee satisfaction, initiative, and most importantly, self-esteem among department heads and staff.
Okay, so those who know me know my management style. I am humble. I don't look for added accolades. My management style is to give that to others, to build them up and know that when they're doing a good job, they know they're doing a good job for me. My management style is to collaborate, to have everybody come to the table who has a stake in whatever the issue is. I don't manage from a high tower or chair. I manage by managing people together and looking for input and getting them to buy into maybe what I want them to buy into, but to have that say. That's my management style. My management style is to thank people. Sometimes those two words you don't hear very often. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. And they respond to that. My management style is to be open and honest. It's not to hide in my office and make judgments and make policies and tell people how they have to do something. That's not my style. If that's a style that maybe some towns look for. I'm not like that. And I think everyone on this committee knows that. I'm hoping the people outside know that. I look to bring people together and to build them up. I don't need building up. I'm already built. I need them to be built up. So that's my style. And again, anybody that knows me, knows that. So. And I'm humble even talking about myself. I hate doing that.
I know, I can tell.
But that's who I am. So
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
Okay, in the time that you served as our interim town administrator here in Carver, what one thing are you most proud of, and what one thing do you think you need to work on?
Let's see, what we're most proud of. I think coming into a situation where a former town administrator already put together a budget with the finance director and having to look at that and pull it apart and see where we can make some adjustments, working with the finance committee and the finance director, and getting the money to increase the veteran services and the council on aging budgets. I think I look at that as probably one of the biggest areas that I feel proud of doing, and also getting the budget finalized and prepared to go to town meeting and getting that passed, a balanced budget. So that was kind of my biggest, I think, in this short 4 months. And again, it takes a couple of months to get up and going and rev into it. So that would be my biggest. What was the worst?
No, just something you need to work on.
I need to work on. Probably work on more, I don't want to say meetings, but having more department head meetings and staff meetings. I'm not one to think that you have to have a meeting for everything. I think some things you can just do by talking to people. but probably pulling more meetings together for groups, big groups, like continue the department head meetings and even have meetings of staff itself, not just department heads. So that's on my background.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cotter?
Yeah, I'd just probably like to roll a little bit of going into the budget process. We've got a couple of repetitive questions, and I just want to take it, just what you've been through with regards to coming in, as you just stated, the budget's partially completed and whatnot, and taking it from there. But in the past, we've had at times different philosophies of town administrators where some would like to wait until the last minute to get all the state aid numbers in, so they're in theory not changing.
Sorry, Mr. Cotter, I can't hear you.
Sorry. Some town administrator we've had in the past would kind of wait as long as they could to start a budget process. One reason was to get the most firm state aid numbers that you could. Others use early predictions, estimates, and things like that to get the budget process started early. So now that you've been through somewhat of a hectic process now, could you kind of explain, if you got this position, it's now September 2022, what is your protocol? What do you do to basically predict revenue, get your expenses, allocate funds to reserve funds and things like that? What's kind of your methodology?
Okay, and the way it worked in Kingston, very similar to how we do it here, is to start early. It's to start the process of meeting with department heads, putting together what their needs are, what their wants may be, which are two different things, and getting that part of the budget working. As we develop the revenue and see what we can estimate as revenue coming in. I talked to Sue Moquin, who's doing a great job as the finance director, and we're on board with this, moving it forward quicker than in the past. And there's no right or wrong way. It's just how I like to do it. I don't like to have things sitting and then not knowing where we're at. That was one of the things coming in here I found a little disconcerting, is that I wouldn't know where the budget was at when I first came in and where we stood. But that has changed through my time here. So to answer your question specifically, I would start early. I would start probably in September, beginning of September, because people take vacations in the summer. It's hard to get people together. And get the department heads to start formulating the budget and to look at estimated revenues at first, because those always can be adjusted as we go along once the revenues start coming in. The goal is to have early, and this became a question on the free cash certification, is to get that done earlier rather than later. So that's another big part of the budgeting process.
Great. And how do you plan your reserve fund, allowances for the current reserve funds that we have in place? Do you try to stop that at the beginning of the process, end of the process?
Again, usually in the beginning, is to get everything together. I think the worst thing to do is put things off until after Christmas. And a lot of towns do that. As you said, they want to know, they get later and later into it to see what the actual state funds are. And so to be able to put their budget together. But I think we have a good handle on it here, on what we can expect. One of the things I'll do too is to look at the budgets and ask the department heads if there's certain areas that they can look at perhaps reducing. In Kingston, we had a kind of, not a contest, but we said, hey, let's see if we can reduce it by 2%. Let's see. And the department heads came forward, and a lot of them did. And we're able to look at the departments more closely, not just adding on to it, not really doing the eagle-eye view of it to see exactly what can be. There might be a little money there. So I think that helps not only them and their department, because they know exactly what they need, but it helps the whole town department, because it might be something that may be shifted a little to another department that's been underfunded over a period of time. So that's my answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Bogart?
The extensive solar development in town recently, coupled with the impending Route 44 project, could result in quite the influx of commercial tax revenue. What do you see a better use of that money for? Lowering residential property taxes or having a larger budget to spend at town meeting?
No. Obviously, I think what you have to do with that is look at how much is coming in. Look at what the needs are for the departments, for the town, and then use part or more of that to reduce the tax burden on the citizens. It's always a concern of having the taxes go up every year. But if we get that revenue coming in and we can keep the taxes where they are, that's a big plus. And that's, so I would look at kind of both ways of seeing if we have an issue where we're underfunded, to do something that has an effect on the majority of people or on a certain segment of people like seniors or something. But not to say, well, good, we get this bunch of money, let's just use it all and increase everybody's budget and give everybody a big raise and build a new building and all that. So I think it's kind of, you have to look at both ways and ultimately I look for guidance from the board on what they want to do with something like that, once we know how much is coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fennessy, do you feel that the working environment has an impact on employee productivity? If so, why? And what do you think your role is in establishing that environment?
I think, of course, it has an impact on the productivity of the people. I think people who work in a situation where they're unhappy project that out to other departments, other people, other citizens that come in. When they have a scowl on their face. I use the motto, make somebody smile today. And tell people that if somebody comes in, you be friendly to them, you help them. Sometimes you can't help them. Sometimes it's something that can't be fixed by town. And I see that in emails every day. But sometimes it's a way you project that to the people, how they take it from the employee. So I think the productivity goes down when the employees are unhappy. And how do I make them happy? I just be honest with them. Sometimes they don't like my answer or my position, but being honest and letting them know why I came to that decision, I think that builds confidence in how they look at me. Not just, I don't blow smoke in their face. I don't, dance around an issue. This is what has to happen, and this is why. So I think I've gained the respect and the admiration of almost all the employees here. If you go around town hall and the department heads, they've all encouraged me to apply for this because they feel comfortable knowing that they know where I stand because of my ethics and my honesty. So.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens.
Thank you. Mr. Fennessy, an overwhelming majority of respondents to our 2022 Open Space and Recreation Plan survey feel that Carver's rural character is worth preserving. It was over about 75%. Do you agree? And if so, how do you plan to help preserve Carver's unique rural character?
I do agree. And thank you for doing that survey. I would see you in here 3 or 4 times a week.
I had a little help.
A few months. So how would I preserve it? So I think it's important because that's what Carver is. I was coming to the town. I didn't have that knowledge and that experience, but I see it every day. I see it talking to employees and people who come in who have cranberry farms and bogs and the passion that they have for that. How do we preserve it? We preserve it by making sure that they can afford the taxes on what they're paying to keep in business, for one thing. We can preserve it by by encouraging our town, our state senate and representatives, that maybe they can look at some kind of subsidies if there's an issue where cranberry growers find that there's such a big drop in price that they think, well, now I can sell my land and we can have a little development there and build more houses or something. So I think I would look at getting in touch with state reps and others, because it's not only Carver, it's a regional thing. So when maybe we all get together and we see if we can put some pressure on the states or help out if it's needed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you. What are the two most important features you feel a town administrator needs to be successful?
So I think the number one is communication, that they need to be able to communicate. And when I say communication, I don't mean just talk to people. I mean, listen to people. That's part of communication. It's two-way. It's a two-way street. Some town administrators just talk. We're going to do this. And they hide in their office, and they don't get involved and listen to other ideas. I think that's the main thing a town administrator needs to have with both staff and boards, and also with the citizens. Another thing, I think they need to have the confidence of the employees, and the confidence of especially the town, the department heads in town, to have confidence that they can come to the town administrator and get something done, what they need to have done. I think that's immensely important. Because if that falls apart between town administrator and town departments and department heads, I think everything falls apart. So that's the two things that I would put on my list as two important things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carter.
I guess coming back to a little bit of a budget question from a just purely state aid standpoint. Obviously, you do what you can with what they're telling you, but what's your best source for getting the best state aid numbers possible? What do you like to go with?
So the best source would be obviously DOR, is to get the state aid, and also with finance director is working to see what is out there, what's happening. You don't get those till later in the process because the state budget is always delayed. And in fact, one town, my own town, would put off even finalizing a budget till town meeting was in June, and they would wait till June to do the finalization of the budget, waiting for those final numbers. And if you remember a few years ago, we didn't get them in time to do that. So it's hard to say what numbers you're going to use and where you get them, but I think you can get them from knowledge of the DOR representatives that we have, and also working with the finance committee and the finance director.
Thank you.
You must be all finance.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. So you're my resource for that.
Ms. Bogart.
If a resident calls or emails you with a concern, how long does it take you to get back to that person?
Usually within a day. And in fact, you sent me something yesterday, and you probably forget already, and it's already in the works. So I don't like to sit on things. I just got back from vacation. It killed me to come back to 180 emails, and I'm sorry I inundated you guys with forwarding some of them. But it's I like to get those things done right now, because and I'm sure everybody here knows, and you put off a concern, and then it gets buried, and it's like, oh, I forgot about that, and then 2 weeks later you're looking at it and saying, oh, here's a concern that I didn't deal with. And so doing it right away is, I find, the best way of dealing with it. Sometimes you can't, because you have to pull in the department head to get an idea of what happened and what the concern was and how how I felt, how I'd say if it was a complaint, and then respond. But I usually send out an email to the person saying that I'm looking into this, and I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fennessy, you came to the town in a bit of a challenging time, and I just sort of curious, what do you see as your biggest accomplishment since you've been here? What are you most proud of?
So, most proud of really getting the budget and the capital plan working and done, working with the other committees. The finance committee's been great. The capital plan committee was great. The biggest accomplishment was getting a budget. My goal when I got here in January, knowing that we had town meeting coming up, is to make sure we're all ready for town meeting. And we got to that point. And I think that was the biggest accomplishment in those first 3 months. Going forward, if I'm lucky enough to be here later, you'll see other things that will present themselves. But just being here a short time, that was the biggest. And again, the biggest is working through the budgets and making sure that we could fund the COA and veterans, and also getting morale out of the town hall and outside.
Thank you.
Those are my biggest things.
Ms. Ewens?
You can pass.
Yeah, I think I will, because I think you've answered my last
Yeah,
question already. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Mr. Hoffman?
I'm all set as well. My questions were answered.
All right. Mr. Cott?
To the extent that you can speak to this, I'm just curious, have you had to negotiate any contracts just yet with the town of Carver and employees? And if it's obviously confidential, it's confidential. I don't know if you've got something completed, or in your prior experience, what's your methodology for the negotiation process?
So yes, we negotiated 3 contracts this since I've been here to fruition, and my method is to look at the contracts that we have prior to. Go into it as not, especially when we're lower than others, is not to say, well, we're here to take away from you. We're here to look at what's reasonable within the context of our comp towns. Because again, we don't want to keep losing people. Obviously it's a negotiation back and forth. Sometimes they don't ask for something and we don't offer it without being asked. And I think we saw that in one of the contracts that we were dealing with. Why didn't they get this? Well, they didn't ask for it. They were comfortable with what was in the contract. So my method is to sit down with the assistant town administrator and I and look at the contracts first and go over them, because obviously she has the knowledge, the historical knowledge that goes with those, and then meet with the union members, go through a process of first exchange, and then go through the process of getting it to fruition. And again, I've done probably at least scores of them, I would say, more than 40 in the towns. And I was the chief negotiator. It's funny, as a board of selectmen member, because of my legal background and my background working with the MSPC and law enforcement, they wanted me on the negotiating team for the town. Generally, it was the town administrator and the assistant, but I always took part of the negotiations because they wanted that experience. So here, I look to Elaine as my co-worker on the negotiations, and it's worked out really well. So that's kind of how I present those. I don't think we have anything coming up this year, this next year. Like it's 2 years from now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bogart?
Do you have a financial or professional relationship with anyone who lives in or owns a business in Carver?
I do not.
See, not all the questions are
That
like
was easy.
Short and to the point. I think as well as Ms. Hewins and Mr. Hoffman, my questions have all been answered. So I will turn to Mr. Carter and Ms. Bogart if you have any remaining questions. Mr. Carter, why don't we start with you? And
No, I think I'm good. Thank you very much for your time.
all right, Ms. Bogart.
Likewise.
All right, Mr. Fennessy, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you'd like to talk to the board about?
No, just as a wrap up, I don't know what's gonna happen today. You know, how the board will feel to vote, and I'm hoping they vote today for something, because it's somewhat nerve-wracking for everybody when you're sitting and wait. But I just want to say that I've been in your position where you're hiring somebody, hiring a town administrator, and I know it's important that you want to pick the right person. I think I'm the right person. I hope the board feels that way and votes that way. But I feel, being a man of faith, that God put me here for a reason, to be here for this interim period, and if it doesn't happen, then I'm okay with that, and I'll move on to the next. Because I think, but I truly feel that this is the best fit for me, and I think it would be the best fit for the town too. So I want to thank everybody for having me in here, making the final three, and even the screening committee. They were great to work with. So I'm glad to be here and hope to be here for a while. So thank you.
All right, thank you. We appreciate it, and we will be in short recess while we bring in our next applicant, Mr. Michael Mcgovern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Once.
I know, mine's gone to sleep, but he wakes up when I want him to.
Equipment's last name. Yeah, I told my daughter has a voice. Because I was worried about the early morning. It's never knows. I'm going back today and then coming back down.
Yeah, okay.
I gotta figure out where we're at. Beach too?
Long Beach Road, so if you come, there's a White Rose Beach Road, Anti Road, they come like this, and Taylor, and so along White Rose Beach,
Okay.
and then there are all these streets that come up off it. So
So you have one.
Talk this out.
Yeah.
But you're not on.
now we're 10 stop, it's 2 second walk.
Well, that's good because you can actually find a place to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have the driveway, so we can get in there, and then we get full business passes. Because it just,
That was a terrible, what we lost.
Let's get some more water real quick, Lindsay.
All right, people. John,
Yeah.
take introductions while you go do that. Okay. All right. All set, Area 58? All right, we are back in order. Thank you. We are back in order, and we're with our, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Would you like to make your introduction?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Your third candidate this morning is Michael Mcgovern. He's currently the town administrator in Shirley, Massachusetts. He has a bachelor's degree. He's working on his MPA. And he's MCPPO, which is the certification for purchasing, certified. Michael Mcgovern.
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Thank you for joining us this morning. And just so you know what we're going to do here, we're going to sort of go around the room and ask some questions. And then at the end, we'll give you an opportunity to tell us anything you might think we might have missed or we might need to know or that you want us to be aware of. All right? Any questions before we start?
no, thank you. How are you?
All right. No, thank you. If you could, please share with us what you know about our community. This is a multi-part question. Please share with us what you know about our community and from your perspective, what are its strengths, its weaknesses, its unique characteristics, and how do your skills and experiences apply?
So I think the town of Carver is going back to last summer, and you had started your process, or initially had started your process, and I started talking to a number of people, a few residents, a few former staff members here in town, and they spoke very highly of the community, very community-oriented, community-based, and that kind of intrigued me. At the time, it really wasn't, my wife and I really weren't ready to make that move, and then obviously it came back in the fall. So I look at Carver as a place of, it still has that rural, that community feel, that you still want to protect that. However, you're also understanding that you're looking at the economic development, and that is a need moving forward towards the future. And I think probably now more than ever, it's critical to really think about planning and what you want to do. And so I think that is something that the town, from my understanding, is very concerned about and really wants to protect that rural feel. I think your finances are in very good shape. One of the questions that was asked to me in the screening process was about the fire department and the EMS, and I was very intrigued by that. And then in doing some more homework, I understood, that it's really a source of pride here in town. That you run this volunteer-based fire department, which is very unique in this day and age. We have something similar to that in Shirley, but we are trying to move more towards a full-time department just because of the situation it is. But I thought that was very, very interesting, and it's incredible that you're talking about having, I think it was somewhere, if I'm not mistaken, 80 on-call firefighters, which is amazing. So I think that's an incredible source of pride for the town. But I believe that my strengths in terms of working in the town of Shirley, which is very similar, the town of Shirley is very concerned with conservation and keeping that rural feel. About a third of our town is in conservation, has some type of conservation restriction, and we work very hard to try and figure out how we can acquire even more land and put it into conservation, and working with grants and the Department of Fish and Game to make that happen.
Thank you, and thank you for recognizing the pride we take in our public service departments, because we do take a tremendous amount of pride in them, so I appreciate that. Ms. Bogart, I'm sorry, Ms. Ewan.
Beg your pardon.
It's been a long day.
That's all right. Excuse me, why do you want to come to Carver in particular, as opposed to another town that's similar?
So once again, for me, I had started talking to a number of residents, some former staff members, and just listening to them talk about how much they liked it here. I thought it was a good fit. Another fit for me too is we do have that rural community similar to what I'm working in Shirley right now. However, we don't have a lot of economic development. We brought in a marijuana dispensary, but most of our economic development is working with mass development in Devons, which is on our property. But I noticed that there is a focus on economic development, and that intrigues me here. So coming from the city of Lowell in my past, and economic development was a big piece of what we did in the city, I enjoy that. And in doing the research about the town, I mean, you have 250 acres up in the North Carver project roughly, and obviously I've noticed in the news over the last month or so about Edenville Railroad, there's another roughly 250 acres, and so there are some things that are going to be challenges, and I enjoy that. I want to be part of that, and I think if we talk about economic development later on, we can talk about how that goes hand in hand with housing in this day and age. It's really changed a lot in the last 10 years in terms of how you think of economic development. You're facing it, I'm facing it surely, especially with things like MBTA communities, the requirement of 750 units. So these are all things that I think I could bring my experience in both the city of Lowell and Shirley here at Carver.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
Welcome. What are the two most important features you feel a town administrator needs to be successful?
I think, so I think this kind of goes to, you know, your management and your leadership style. And so over the last couple of years, right, we're all aware COVID's really changed the landscape here. And it's changed how we've had to manage, right? And as a leader, I think that we've been forced to, you know, be a little more flexible, be a little more understanding. And surely we have a younger staff, so you have daycare, you have school-age children at home. So that was even another layer of challenges that we had to face. So one of the things that we did is we brought the staff together as a group, discussed the challenges that we were going to face, talked to the staff individually, talked to the unions, worked with them, and we kind of came up with a plan together on what we thought would work best for the group and for the residents, because ultimately still, you know, business needed to be conducted. So we worked out a plan. I think, you know, being fair, consistent, honest, being clear as what's expected. I also think it's very important to acknowledge the staff. Right? If you have a staff that's worked on, a staff member or members that's worked on a project and it has to be presented to the board, typically I bring that staff member, the director, the support staff, whomever it may be, have them do the presentation to you. Right? They're the ones that worked on the project. Give them the accolades, give them the credit. I don't do that. And I think that goes a long way. I'm there really to support the staff, give them the tools that they need to be able to succeed. It's about empowering them to be able to make decisions, try new programs, look at things differently, encourage them to take advantage of as many trainings as possible, seminars, whatever it may be. I look at it is that, you know, if we have, say, an assistant accountant or assistant treasurer, you want to take a training? Sure, I'll find a way to pay for that, because it's important to kind of groom from within. Right? It serves two purposes. You look on the MMA site and everybody under the sun is looking for qualified treasurers, accountants, whatever other positions. Well, if we can groom our assistant accountant or assistant treasurer to take that spot whenever the person at the top moves on, then that's fantastic. It's great for the organization, but it's also great for the employee, where they look at it and say, hey, you know, if we work hard, there's an opportunity for growth. I think that's very important. Teamwork. And I think something really just simple, right? It's about respect. It's about treating the staff with respect, treating them with dignity. You know, just the small things sometimes, just saying hello to people, asking them how their day is. I want people to feel that I'm approachable. You know, my lunch takes about 2 hours, and surely because people just constantly come in, I eat at my desk. I'll meet with the staff member to talk about some matter, and it might be 5 minutes, and we end up talking for another 10 minutes after that on just kind of general life things. I think those types of things, the way I look at it is I'm a caretaker. I'm only going to be here for however long. You probably have a lot of good staff here that are going to be here long after I'm gone, or whoever you end up selecting. And, you know, I want to make them feel comfortable coming to work. Life's tough enough as it is, they don't have to come to work miserable.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Carr?
Can you provide a brief summary of why you're leaving your current position? I think you're actively working right now for the town of Shirley.
Yes. So my board knows that I'm looking for other employment. My wife and I own a house in Plymouth, and we bought it about 5 years ago at this point. I'm from the Merrimack Valley. My wife is. Those two things aren't supposed to happen. The people from the North Shore coming down to the South Shore, we can't wait to move down there. I'm not saying anything out of school. I know this is on television. I think the people are little bit nicer down here. And, you know, I don't know if it's the water or whatever, but we really want to get down here. My wife's ready to retire. She works at Old General Hospital, and she's done. She's ready to retire. So we're looking to get down here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bogart.
As you can imagine, the candidates that we're seeing have similar backgrounds, resumes, essay question answers. What sets you apart from them, and what would you bring to the position that sets you apart?
So I think, as I mentioned just briefly here, you know, obviously my resume, my City of Lowell experience. And I assure you, I'm not looking to, I said this to the Shirley Select Board 4 years ago, I'm not looking to bring Lowell to Carver. So do not worry about that. But I think what I'm looking to do is bring my experience from Lowell to Carver. And one of the benefits that I experienced in Shirley was that, you know, coming from the fourth largest city at the time, there pretty much wasn't anything I saw that I didn't see. And, you know, and I think having that level of experience, being involved with all of the facets and the factions of day-to-day operations of a $350 million operation, I don't think there's any substitute for that experience. Dealing with, you know, the health department, fire, and police, and the way the planning reform government works is that the city manager, the assistant city manager, the appointing authority, everyone answers to those two titles. And so, like I said, you know, I'm dealing with 1 minute with a pothole on my way into work at 7:30 in January, and I pull in and I have a custodian running out and saying it's raining in the library. And I mean, literally, it was like it was raining in the library. The pipes had burst. And so all of a sudden, that becomes my week of dealing with that situation and activating all of the necessary staff and dealing with getting the library cleaned up, which ultimately was about a 2-month process. But that initial emergency phase, I think the crisis management is a very strong piece that I developed, not only in City Lowell, but also at Great Lowell Tech. So I worked directly for the superintendent. Any crisis management, I was right there on the ground. I was usually the point person for the superintendent. Any crisis management that we had to deal with in the City of Lowell, I was that first point of contact in to see the city manager, and then I ran kind of the operations. You know, I never told the police chief or the fire chief what to do, or a DPW director. I was there to coordinate the efforts. It's what they do, it's their specialty.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have you had a chance to, are you familiar with our select board financial management policies? Have you read them? And if you have, what are your thoughts on them?
Unfortunately, I have not read your financial policies. I apologize for that.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Ms. Ewens.
Thank you. I'd like to know what your management style is and how that particular style will foster professionalism, employee satisfaction, initiative, and most importantly, self-esteem among the department heads and staff.
So I think kind of going back to what I had talked about earlier, I think it comes down to respect and treating the staff with dignity. You know, I always tell the staff, come see me, everything can be fixed, okay? We can figure anything out. I just need to have you come and talk to me. And so, which I don't really care for, but that open door policy, it really is true. You know, you come up, you don't need an appointment to see me. A lot of the times, I end up going to the offices myself. I have no problem going down and sitting with whatever department head or staff member, you know, asking them instead of calling them up to my office type of thing. That's really not who I am. I absolutely require that people have to treat each other with respect as well. I will not tolerate any of the nonsense between staff members. There may be disagreements, I get that. We're not always going to get along all the time, but we can be professional. I will support staff too. I'm sure, as the five of you know too, that sometimes things can get a little challenging if you have disputes with residents that they don't quite see eye to eye with what you're trying to present. And I'll act as the mediator. I always tell staff, if you have a really difficult situation, give me a call. I'll come downstairs or I'll come to your office and I'll help get in the middle of that and calm things down and sort things out. And so that's really, but it goes back to a lot about what I had said before about being fair and honest and consistent, being clear in what's expected, right? And not having two different sets of rules, one for this person, one for that one. But also to be flexible, especially during COVID. We had different staff members with different situations. And you never really want to do two sets of rules for different people, but this has made us really change and rethink how we had to operate. That somebody had to get their son or daughter logged on at 8 o'clock in the morning for school, and so they couldn't get there till 8:20. Come talk to you, make sure everybody else was going to be okay with it, and just work out things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
What do you feel the town administrator's role is in getting the budget prepared for the annual town meeting?
So for me, it's been a budget has been something that's been a major focus, which it should be at any point. But in the town of Shirley, we faced a lot of financial and budgetary issues. For me, I'm very, very hands-on with the budget. We have really revamped our budget over the last 4 years. I believe that it's a working document that you should always be looking to restructure for efficiencies if you need so. Really always looking at that document. So we've gotten now to the point where we're able to actually have a community compact grant where we're finally going to be able to do some forecasting. Prior to this year, but that budget had been reworked over the last 4 years. Quite frankly, it was a mess. So in terms of the process, right, I believe that it's about being inclusive and about being conservative. We do the typical thing where, we meet with department heads, ask them what their needs are, what their goals are for the upcoming fiscal year, both in their operating budget and their capital plan. And then we start to work with that and put that together, look at where we can maybe change some things or maybe add some things depending on the staff request. And then we start to put that together. I give the select board a complete overview and a couple of their meetings leading up to our meetings with the FinCom. I have a very, very good working relationship with FinCom. We meet for probably about 3 months and go through bringing the department heads, go through all those line items. Prior to me, the relationship with the FinCom and the select board and the staff members was very difficult. It was very, very difficult. We've really repaired that relationship. I have an excellent relationship. As a matter of fact, there's a gentleman that's been on it for about 26 years. I'm not saying this about him, he says it about himself. He can be a little curmudgeon-y. And he is not asking to be reappointed this year because he feels that for the first time in his 26 years, this is the best shape that the budget has been, the town has been financially. And so, I take a lot of pride in that. I have an excellent working relationship, and the select board has a very good relationship with FinCom now as well, which wasn't always the case. So really for me, I am constantly dealing with the budget. It is not something that you go through that January or whenever you start your budget and town meeting, you vote on it, you put it up on the shelf, and that's it. I'm constantly managing and monitoring that budget. But my goal is to make your job and your lives as easy as possible, right? That is my responsibility, to be able to put all that together. So it gives you an opportunity to be able to go through so that you have everything packaged up and bundled for you to make it as easy as possible for you to go through the budget and ask questions and inquire about items on the budget.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cotter?
And just as a follow-up more on the budget process, the first item, I guess go back to, in the past, I've seen town administrators that like to wait until the latest possible moment, only because they're waiting for state aid numbers to be finalized. Some start early and they just go, hey, we know every single year this is what's going to happen and the percentage is going to be between this and whatnot. So I guess and a two-part question, I guess. What is your best source for establishing state aid that you think is the most accurate one? Your handling expenses, you've talked about that. I get that it's a moving document and you kind of manage it all year long and whatnot. But then balancing the operating budget with capital requirements, capital needs. And you can kind of summarize what your philosophy is, because they all tie into one in the budget process.
So in terms of the state aid and expenses that we have, we always budget with a conservative estimate in mind. Obviously the governor's budget's coming out usually later in January, but we're already looking at numbers even prior to that. We're basing it on 2% increases. That's all we ever do. And we have to. We can't, we don't have the luxury, we didn't have the luxury of playing around with numbers or anything. We had to be as conservative as possible. In terms of the capital program, we've made a huge effort. This goes back to mentioning about bringing staff member and looking at their capital plans. Over the last couple of years, I've really made a huge effort in reducing as much debt as possible. And so, for example, in FY21 capital plan, we used free cash to pay for our entire capital plan. This past year, for the FY22, I actually used ARPA funds. It was about $325,000 for our capital plan. And I took all of that off, all of the FY22, used our ARPA funds. That then in turn took off about $86,000 that I had to account for in my budget. My goal was to take as many big ticket items off that 5-year capital plan as much as I could. So we'll say last year's capital plan was about $2.1 million. And we had a fire truck on an out year, I think maybe about 3 years down the road. So I'm talking, $700,000, $800,000 for an engine. We had an ambulance on there as well. I had a $220,000 Freightliner truck on there. And I'm using ARPA funds to reduce about $1.6 million off that list. So this year's capital plan that was presented at town meeting was only a 5-year capital. I'm sorry, it was only about $500,000. And so it goes back to being conservative and really trying to make sure that budget is as sound as possible. The last couple of years, I had started off after I added all my revenues and my expenses up. I had about $17,000 in wiggle room. That's not a whole heck of a lot. We started our process off at the beginning of this year, it was about $8,500, but that's a lot better than my first couple of years where we were $200,000 in the hole starting on. We're now at about 187 after we put the FY22 capital plan, that debt coming off there, a few other items. We're at about $187,000. We're doing well for the town of Shirley. 187,000 seems like about 18 million for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bogart?
The amount of solar development in town, coupled with the Route 44 project, you had mentioned the 200 and so acres up in town, that impending project could result in quite the influx in commercial tax revenue in town. What do you see as a better use for that money? Lowering residential taxes or having a larger budget to spend?
So for us, so my philosophy, once again, is about being conservative here, right? I'm trying to build up as much of my reserves as possible in Shirley. So I'm a saver. Our staff members, when they come in and they meet with us, they pretty much know that their budget's going to be level funded every year. They're very, very understanding. They're very good about that. There are some things that you just can't get around. So I am always trying to reduce the debt, keep the taxes as low as possible on the residents. I'm not looking to come in and all of a sudden, whenever I leave, you find that your budget has grown by $25 million or so because I just keep adding and adding and adding. That's not the legacy that I would want to have. I think it's, once again, about being fiscally conservative here. You have to make investments in your infrastructure, in your facilities, so there's no way around that and everything. But just to, going back a moment ago, having that 187, as I said to the FinCom, so we're in very good financial shape in Shirley right now, but that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, the bank vault gets open and we just start spending willy-nilly. Absolutely not. When I walked in, we were about $500,000, and our general stabilization, we're at 1.7 now. Cap was down to about 300, we're up to 900. We actually created a third special purpose stabilization fund and put in $250,000 into that account. So I'm about being very conservative.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you feel the working environment has an impact on employee productivity? If so, why? And what is your role in establishing that environment?
Yeah, once again, yes. So, we talked about this in a couple of different other questions. I think it's extremely important that you have to have a decent place to work. Like I said, life has become so much more complicated, right? In the last 10 years or so, and particularly over the last couple of years. I don't want people coming to work miserable and unhappy. And I really believe that my role is to help facilitate a friendly, happy environment, not only for the staff here, but for the residents who come in and conduct business here. That was another thing in Shirley where, residents really just dreaded coming in because of the service. And, we've changed that, right? People, I hear them, they say that it's a much nicer place to come in. That, once again, I like to joke around. As I always say, life's too short. I don't take myself too seriously. It's, you have to laugh, right? You deal with a lot here in government. It can be stressful. And so, you need to take a deep breath. Once again, just take a deep breath. We can figure everything out together. And if that doesn't work, then just treating people nicely and getting to know one another, that we're all human, then you offer food, right? So you bring bagels in the morning. Or as a matter of fact, Thursday, we have our cookout. We do a cookout for the staff. And we do a cookout for all the staff on Thursday before Memorial Day. So the firefighters, I'll buy all the food and everything for the town employees. And any resident that happens to be coming, they're more than welcome to grab a dog and a burger, and the fire department cooks for me and everything. So it's just remembering that the 8 or 9 hours that you're here isn't the end all. You have to be happy.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens?
We just completed our 2022 Open Space and Recreation Plan survey, and an overwhelming majority of the respondents to that survey feel that Carver's rural character is worth preserving. Do you agree? And if so, how do you plan to help preserve Carver's unique rural character?
So I would definitely agree with that. Once again, going back to my experience in Shirley, you know, it is extremely important to the people in Sherwood. Once again, about a third of the town is in conservation, some type of restriction. So we reactivated, the select board reactivated about 2 years ago, the Greenway Committee as well. So we have conservation and recently reactivated the open space and rec committee, I think about 6 months ago, to update our program. So we really have 3 different committees in town that are focused on conservation. And since I've been there, we've received a number of grants from the state to purchase land. And it really is, you know, being able to take a look at your map, see what's in conservation, and trying to connect the parcels. We did that with about a 62-acre, we call it Morse property. We ended up getting a $262,000 EEA land grant to purchase that. We work very, very closely with Fish and Game to identify parcels and work with them for purchasing the grants. We actually applied for a Forest Legacy grant recently, and that was to protect, I think about 60 acres in total. Two different parcels, about 30 acres each or so. So there really is this effort to look at the town overall and strategically. And that's not to say that, you know, that the Conservation Commission and the Greenway Committee are very good about, well, we're going to grab this parcel of land and it's our only industrial zone land or something like that. And that kills any kind of potential development that we have. So that's not the case. So it's about being able to work together.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
Okay, the town administrator appoints people to various boards and committees. Would you have a problem rescinding one of your appointments that you made? If no, what would be the reason you would rescind it? And if yes, why wouldn't you rescind an appointment?
So I think it's really, so it's all about the facts for me. You know, all personal feelings are removed. For me, if it got to a point where you were even talking about having to rescind a board member or a committee member, or even really a staff member to that matter, right? That it has to rise to that level. In my mind, it would have to be something serious and egregious, not necessarily just a case of that, you know, you don't really agree with them, right? That your vision is you're maybe more development versus somebody that has more open space or rec thought process or whatever. You know, that, so it would really have to get to a professional level or an unprofessional level for me to say, yes, it's time for that person to go. You know, beyond that, you know, it's pretty easy for me. I'll work with people. Like I said, we're not always going to agree. I'm more than willing to help staff and give them the tools also, if you know, to help them succeed. But ultimately, if it gets to a point where somebody is being detrimental to the organization, then the decision is easy for me.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Carter?
I'm all set. You answered the question already.
All set?
I'm all set, thanks.
All right. Ms. Bogart?
Let's say a resident calls or emails you with a concern. How long does it take you to get back to that person?
As soon as possible. I mean, I think that's, I started off my career in the Boston City Council back in '93, State House, the same thing, right? It's constituent services, and that's extremely critical. You know, so as soon as I can get back in touch with the person, we make an effort. And I tell that to staff as well. The worst thing you can do is just not get back to somebody. Now it becomes, well, you also don't respond. You know, I call their office a couple times, and that just makes it even worse, right? And it's embarrassing For me, it's embarrassing for you. The last thing that you want to be is at Dunkin' Donuts on Saturday morning and have a resident come say, hey, you know, I called your TA or a staff member, you know, the accountant or whoever, and they, you know, they never get back to me. You know, and sometimes there's a very good reason, right? Somebody could be out sick or something like that. But still, you know, for you to hear that when you're out in the community, it's a little disturbing. So.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Sorry. How would you get involved in our community? And could you give us some examples of your previous community involvement?
So I think that it's very important to be involved with the community. Obviously, in the city of Lowell, we were out all the time. Just, you know, you could be out 7 days a week. There are so many functions and events and that type of thing. And so, you know, in Shirley, there's not as many of those types of things. You know, we don't have a lot of meetings. The meetings that we do have, they're community events, or their community matters really are about their committees, believe it or not. You know, it seems to be part work and part social for a lot of our committees in Shirley. Any organizations, I typically go to speak. I go out and I meet with the local business owners. I interact very closely with Devon's, which has a number of businesses on their property in which I go and interact with them. I'll go up and meet with the Shirley Historical Society. So there's you know, being involved with, you know, we have a couple parades during the year, not very large anymore like that, but being involved with them. We just started doing a tree lighting at Shirley Center, Front Street there downtown. So being involved and being visible with that. But I think it's really about being accessible to the community, and kind of building up those public-private partnerships as well, and being kind of the face of the town in terms of business that needs to get done and any interaction they have. I mean, obviously, the five of you are really the face of the town in terms of the structure. I'm here to, once again, facilitate that.
Thank you. Ms. Jones.
Thank you. Could you tell us what is the professional accomplishment that you're most proud of and the one thing that you most regret professionally?
The one thing that I'm most proud of, I would have to say, I think the town of Shirley. I mean, I had the city of Lowell. I mean, there were plenty of projects that we implemented, or you know, need program where we went after absentee landlords and forcing some of the residents just living in these horrible conditions, and it just disgusting. And coming into the city, you know, once a month to collect their check and then heading back out to, I won't name any of the very affluent communities or anything like that too. You know, that really, so I was very proud of establishing the need program. But overall, I think the town of Shirley, when I walked in there was a recall of 2 of the 3 selectmen. The town was extremely fractured. It was very divisive, not only in the community, but within the building itself. And some of it was between staff members, but a lot of it was really just that, you know, they were almost shell-shocked because they felt like that they were involved in some political football league. And, you know, and so I had to really, you know, rebuild that trust with the staff, rebuild that trust in the community. The select board and I work hand in hand. We're very open. We're very transparent. We talk about everything. We have an issue. It's discussed here. It's not behind closed doors. And then about 6 months in, not only did I realize those pieces, I realized that financially town was a disaster. It really was. They had not reconciled their cash and receivables since 2016. I think in 2019, or 20, I think which year, we got $1 million in free cash. I joke around and say I like to think it's because of my strong financial management, but the reality is that we had to bring a company and they cleaned up a lot of our accounts, and we realized $1 million in free cash. Once again, talking about our budget and where we are financially, creating a third stabilization fund, putting on 3 firefighters, which they never thought they would be extra firefighters. We had 4. You'll probably be able to put up a couple more because of what we did with the ambulance enterprise fund in the fall. We're at about $300,000 in retained earnings for the ambulance. So, we had our town meeting the other day, and 20 articles, not one question on why we were looking to put $250,000 in another stabilization account. We had a couple holds on our budget. The assessment line had increased 12%, the select board, which was for the negotiations. And we were out of there in an hour and 15 minutes. People, I like to think that people tell me I'm not really trying to pat myself on the back. That makes me very uncomfortable. So I'm not trying to do that. I think that people trust what we do. Very few people attend our select board meetings, whereas before I got there, you would have 70, 80 people in a room probably about the size of out here, packed in every single meeting, and very few people come to our meetings. I tell people, come on, you want to talk about finances? I'll sit you down, go over the budget. It's your money, it's not my money.
And what's the thing that you most regret professionally?
One of the things that I most regret, probably one of the things that I most regret is, so with Greater Lowell Tech, and if you don't know type thing. We had a student pass away in the pool area. And there were things that probably should have been changed over the years. Things that probably could have been done and weren't done. And as a result, a young student passed away in front of the pool. And I'll never forget that. We had to sit with his grandmother, Self-Esteem board, and had to sit with his family and everything like that. It was probably one of the most greatest things I've ever used.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we have 7 questions left, and Mr. Cotter, I think 5 of them are yours. So why don't we throw it to you and let you ask those questions, and some of them you may feel they're already answered, and then I think Ms. Bogart, you have a couple after that. So we'll let John ask his questions, then we'll go to you, and then we'll see where we're at.
Sure. He's answered some, so, okay. Have you ever been involved in establishing or redefining departmental responsibilities, and how did you ensure that all departments work in a collaborative manner?
So, more so in Lowell, and I apologize for going back to the larger city versus the town. That's probably the best example I can give. We have in Shirley, we don't have a lot. We only have about 50 employees. And they're all it's 2 employees in the treasurer's office, 2 in the accountant's office, that type of thing. So it's not really a lot of wiggle room for efficiencies. We have changed a couple jobs, as I mentioned a moment ago, with the assessor and line item. We had it was called a floater, 20 hours in the assessor, 20 hours in land use, ZBA, and the planning board. And what we were finding was we were keeping people for about a year, and they were heading off to someplace else. And what it was that you would get some person that really enjoyed the assessing piece, but not so much with the land use, or vice versa. And so what we figured is, this is really crazy. So I worked with the union, worked with the assessor, and 2 other land use departments. There was also about a $5,000 stipend in the conservation budget for the secretary, which we're never going to fill $5,000. So what we did was we took the money, reallocated it, and we created another position, no extra money, no additional money to the budget, 28 hours a week for a true land use employee, planning board, ZBA, and now conservation, which our conservation agent desperately needs some assistance. And then the assessor figured she didn't need a 20-hour person, she only needed about 12 hours or so. So we created a 12-hour position down in that office. And so those are some of the efficiencies that, we've taken on. The ambulance director, the ambulance enterprise clerk. She also dealt with the sewer enterprise fund as well. Our fire chief was really in need of some clerical support, so we changed the ambulance enterprise position to a fire safety clerk. So in Lowell, though, we really took a look, in my time there, we took a look at departments, how they operated, and we ended up creating a brand new Health and Human Services department, which we didn't have one. Once again, no extra cost to the budget. We didn't have it. It was all based on reconfiguring. We found, or we realized that there were 5 departments that were kind of hanging out there on their own. They really didn't have, except for their director, but they didn't have a person to go to above them. And financially, they were constantly calling the CFO, which he was fine with, but it really wasn't that efficient. And so we ended up combining health, the library, council on aging, veterans, and recreation, and created this new HHH division. We also, what we did was we put in a couple of the departments that didn't have finance people. So we created a finance person for public safety for both police and fire. They also did grants for both those departments. Put a finance person up at DPW. And then we also took a look at, we combined the wastewater and water departments at Lowell, because our wastewater division had a lot more equipment than our water department had. And so we ended up, and a lot of times if there was a water main break, we'd have to call in a private company to come in and fix it. And by combining those 2 departments, the wastewater equipment could be brought onto a water main break and get it fixed. So those were the efficiencies that we really looked and took on.
Thank you. Could you just talk a little bit about, obviously a big part of this job is negotiating contracts. What's your typical strategy, or how do you plan for that, I guess I should say?
So in terms of like personnel contracts, I do all of the negotiating in the town of Shirley. I was negotiating in the city of Lowell with the HR director, the city solicitor. The city manager would come in and out of meetings, as well as the CFO as well. But in Shirley, it is me. And I sit with these bargaining units. I have maybe a little bit of a different approach, but it goes back to some of the discussion earlier about treating people fairly. So the staff really were really underpaid. Everybody, clerical, police, fire, and Shirley, dramatically underpaid. And so, and I told them when we first sat down 2 years ago for all of the contracts, I said, look, I get you're underpaid. You all know my situation with the finances. I don't have a goose down in the basement with the golden eggs. I said, but I'll do what I can for you. I'll try and do what I can for you. I may not be able to help you out completely in this first contract, but you have to work with me. And I give you my word, if you work with me, I'll work with you. And, you know, it may take a couple contracts here, but we'll get you up to where some of the surrounding communities are. And so that's my philosophy. I also don't believe, in Shirley, once again, the clerical union, they don't get much. They don't have much, right? And I don't believe that I need to sit at that table, you know, and puff out my chest and say, well, I'm going to give you that. You're giving me that. Right? Obviously, if there are things that the town feels that they need to readjust or, you know, relook at in a contract, then yeah, we will work towards those. You know, but just for the sake of saying, hey, if I'm going to give you something, you're giving me something in return. I mean, quite frankly, in the clerical union, I'm not even sure how much they would be able to give me for anything. And you know, it's the same with DPW. We went through our negotiations last time. We did police and fire. I agreed to do a 2-year contract because you could get them back to the table. They were really underpaid. Get them back to the table quicker. DPW and clerical did three-year contracts. So in terms of other negotiations, and I'm sorry about being long-winded here, but I also negotiate other contracts on behalf of Time Warner Regional Dispatch System with AIR. So I negotiate that contract. We negotiate on behalf of the town of Shirley for the Devon's Jurisdictional Framework Committee. It goes back to the old mass development. Devon's very convoluted setup where AIR, Shirley, and Harvard are involved, as well as Devon's and mass development. You know, I negotiate with the U.S. Army. Fort Devens is still an active base. I negotiate with MCI because we have 2 prisons on Shirley property. And the cable ascertainment agreement, I just negotiated that on behalf of the town. We don't have a cable advisory committee. In City of Lowell, I was in all negotiations with the city manager and the city solicitor, Lowell Spinners, you know, the minor league baseball team we had there. So it's extensive. Up at Greater Lowell Tech, the same thing. I sat in on negotiations with the superintendent.
Thank you.
Also, Mr. Goddard, you good? All right. Ms. Bogart?
Do you have a professional or financial relationship with anyone who lives in or works in Carver?
So full disclosure, we talked about, you know, my interest in Carver and everything, and so I talked to a lot of people. I did run into, I think he's on the board of your board of assessors, and he owns, is it Crystal Lake, the nursery?
Mike Paddock?
Yes, I believe so. Back in November, he was getting rid of a lot of stuff up at the Plymouth store, which my wife and I go there quite a bit. I had my City of Lowell jacket on. We got talking, and I think he gave me a pretty fair price for my 4 wire boxes that I bought. So that's about the extent of my connection and financial disclosure for you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bogart, are you good?
Yes.
All right. Anything else from any members of the board? No? Okay. Mr. Mcgovern, is there anything else you'd like us to know? Anything else you'd like to tell us?
I actually want to apologize for your question about the financial policy. I'm so sorry about that. I feel, I'm sorry.
No,
It was,
not a concern.
yeah,
It's riveting.
That's right, they are riveting reading, that's right.
I would probably guess, I mean, everything I've been through in Shirley and what I've seen and everything, I think my senses would probably be on the same page anyways. So.
Anything else?
No, once again, just thank you very much, and I really, I look forward to the possibility of being here.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your interest in the town of Carver.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Why don't we take a very short recess, then we'll come back to deal with our 11:30 agenda item, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Carver. Our next item on the agenda is the discussion and possible vote on the hiring of town administrator and to designate a subcommittee for the purpose of negotiating a contract with the town administrator. So I guess my first question to the board, my first question to the board is, does the board feel that they are ready at this point to make a decision? And I guess I would just poll the board to see where we're at. Ms. Bogart, how do you feel?
I would love to have discussion and hear everyone's opinion, but yes, I think I could.
Okay. Mr. Cotter?
I'm just looking at a lot of my notes. I think I'd like to take possibly the weekend just to go through this, and if we could
All right.
vote at our Tuesday meeting, that would be my preference.
All right. Ms. Ewens?
I'm ready to make a decision.
Mr. Hoffman?
I agree with Mr. Carter. I'd like to take a couple days and.
Okay.
We have a meeting on Tuesday.
Well, I think if that's the case, then I think we probably should take the weekend, make this an agenda item on our meeting on May 24th, and make a decision at that point. If anyone wants to have a discussion at this point, we could have it, but I think, quite frankly, if people want to take the time to think about it, we probably are better off having that discussion on the 24th. But I will entertain any discussion folks want to have now. Thoughts?
Well, I guess my question might be for MRI?
Yeah. Yep.
As far as the, could you talk a little bit about, I know that the search committee did a great job on taking all the candidates that they came into them, but what was your role with regards to how'd you go through the whole list and come up with something that you thought fit our town?
Well, you know, I know Tom, by the way, congratulations to Tom and his committee. It was
I'm sorry,
enjoyable.
Mr. Chair, could you please,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, the folks at home can't possibly hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's been a long meeting, so if you could just introduce yourself once again for the folks at home.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Bob Mercier. I'm with MRI, Municipal Resources, Inc. We're engaged by the community to help you find your next town administrator. And we've been working very closely with Tom, who drove the bus pretty hard, as he suggested to us. He's been through this a couple of times, so he was great to work with, and the 9 committee members were just terrific. It was fun for us to kind of get to know people in the community, and they were engaged. I will suggest that they were engaged. So we went through the process, the advertising, you know, all of the screening that we do. MRI does screening. We know a lot of candidates. We know a lot of the folks who are out there. I will say that the field, or the number of candidates who apply, is down across the board. We're not sure if it's COVID-related or whatever it happens to be. Some people were directly involved, given the timing of this, in their town meetings, and just chose not to go through the formal process. You heard Mike say his town meeting was last week. So there's a lot of prep, as you know, for a sitting town administrator. Not so much with David. He is not currently employed as an administrator. Mr. Fennessy is, so 2 of the candidates were going through that whole issue at the time. So ultimately, when we went to his committee with the people we thought were the best qualified of the people we had, we did have a couple drop out, and they drop out, to your question, they drop out at the essay stage. And what that tells us is they're not as concerned or committed to the town of Carver. They're interested in a job, but not so much the town of Carver. So that's a good thing in our mind. It screens out people who are looking for a job, not specifically to be the town administrator in Carver. So the 3 candidates that the committee recommended, we think are all highly qualified. All 3 of those individuals will land a job somewhere. It could be here, it may not be, but whoever is selected here, the 2 non-successful candidates will be employed by another community. And that's how we're here today with those 3 candidates. The committee recommended moving those 3. We nor they rank anybody. That's up to you. It's about the fit.
And if I could interject, when the board gave the charge to the committee, we specifically asked for an unranked.
Correct. Correct. And Tom told us that, and we recommend that any screening committees don't rank anybody.
Sure.
It's your decision, not anybody else's. So that's where we are, and we're here today to discuss. We're here as a resource. We don't try to move the discussion in any direction, it's really your decision.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Carter?
Nope.
All right. Anything else from the board? I guess I would just say I thought we interviewed 3 extremely qualified candidates, and thank you to you folks. Mr. Walsh, thank you. I think the committee did an excellent job. Any other discussion the board would like to have about this? Otherwise, I'll schedule an agenda item for our meeting on May 24th, and we'll go into further discussion and hopefully make a decision at that point. I do think it's urgent. Remember, we have an interim town administrator who has a contract that ends on June 30th. Some of our applicants may indeed be applying to other towns as well. So I think it's in the best interest of the board to move forward on this as quickly as possible. So, anything else?
I just want to publicly thank Tom and his committee as well for going through the process again, and your company as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
3 great candidates.
All right.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Thank you, Tom, and the committee, and you, Bob.
Thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Makes a motion.
Motion.
Second.
One of you made a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
Great.